Hi there. Greetings, salutations. Happy Monday to you, and it is beautiful outside. I don't know if I've told you this before or not, Eddie Garrison, but if you live in San Diego, California, it is like this 362 days a year.
What about the other three?
The other three, actually, thank you for asking. It is still nice, but people are inside doing their taxes.
You see, last week that number was 363, so you've changed the number
Leap year.
now. Okay.
Yeah. You got to add that in.
Yeah.
But it is gorgeous outside, and it is a Monday, and we are starting a great week here on The Fan at 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. This is Query & Company. Thanks for joining us. We are happy to have you in the company. If you are new to the program, where have you been? My name is Jake Query. I don't know that I have a title within Query & Company, but Eddie Garrison is the company CEO, correct?
Yes, and you're the chairman of the board.
I told you my intramural basketball team in high school was chairman of the boards.
Yep.
That was after they outlawed any names.
Yeah, that wasn't the first draft. There's no way that was the opening name.
There were popular team names before that. Mixed Nuts was a popular team.
Yeah.
Little Kings was always a big one. 8 Ballers, also common. I don't know if I should say the name of one of them, but there was one team that was named after a whale, but it used. So at any rate, my favorite was, well, I'll tell you guys off air. So there were several team names in the North Central High School basketball intramural system that had innuendos, double entendres, if you will. And by my senior year, they'd caught on to all of it. So we had to submit names in advance. And so we went with chairman of the boards, which isn't bad for a basketball team, right?
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
I like it.
So at any rate, Jimmy Cook, who you just heard from here, is the president of the company. And those of you who listen to this show are the company in general. So we have all of the different listeners that are assigned titles within the company. We have a lot of directors of security. We have a director of giddiness. We have an entire list. Somebody just sent me. Now, let me just send you. This was, I believe this team won the championships one year in intramurals. Jeff Canada, my buddy, just sent me that name. I don't think can we say that on the air?
Probably not.
Okay. That was actually one of the team names on the morning announcements. Are like, and then here I'll write down for you another one. And this is terrible radio, I realize. But at any rate, thank you to those of you who are in the company. Jimmy is back. You had a crazy week because it began with you were a sequestered part of a jury. This was for a trial that took place in Vanderburgh County. A guy robbed a bank, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a pretty high profile. I think I'd heard once, things got wrapped up that you had talked about this, about it being a pretty high profile case and bank robbery. And surprisingly enough, which was weird because I had felt like that there was a lot of incriminating evidence here from footage and eyewitness testimony.
Did the little tie bomb go off? On the fella
in the bank. Yeah, he had ink on his hands too.
Really?
It was weird. There was so much evidence that I thought could have corroborated this thing, but we wound up acquitting the guy. So got out of there actually by about Tuesday.
What was his reasoning for the blue dye everywhere? Did he have
He pulled a fire alarm.
Okay.
And they have, as you know, with some newer fire alarm tech, they got the ink
so
in there.
So you couldn't necessarily determine.
Correct.
Okay.
It was circumstantial, they said.
So just out of curiosity, after the acquittal then, with the newfound riches, did he take you guys out to dinner? No funny business like that, right?
I couldn't possibly comment if there's any bribery towards the jury box. I can't. That's no. I think
so by Tuesday you were done with and you let the bosses know, and they're very kind here at the company. So they said, well, since you had to go through sequester and you were away from your expecting wife and everything else, they said, you guys just go on vacation?
Yeah, and they already said as well.
This fella didn't front that, did he?
What bosses? I mean, we have no HR company. We have no HR department. So, what bosses are you referring to here?
That is true. So then you went on vacation.
We did. We went on vacation because they'd already booked out. The company is always on point with stuff. They had people in here for me to be able to set up the week to make sure that everything stayed in order. I feel like I'm going to miss somebody, so if I'm wrong, tell me. James Boyd, I know, was in here twice. Zach Kiefer was in here. Derek Schultz. Am I leaving somebody out?
Me. I was in here.
Eddie Garris was in here, but was that the lineup?
Corbin.
That's right.
Corbin
Corbin
was in for a day because we were busy rescuing your and congratulations on being a new kitten owner, Jim.
Thank you very much. I can't do that though, but I did hear the kitten story, and I'm looking forward to seeing the journey for the little fella and where he does end up. But no, we went on vacation, had a wonderful time. We're on a cruise for a couple of days, and then that port was in Cape Canaveral, so we were with my wife's family. We ended up going to Disney World for 2 days too. So it was a nice, relaxing vacation, especially, Jake, not just with the workload that we go through here, but when you're going through a high-profile trial like that, you need a proper way to mentally escape from things. So it was great. Got a little bit of sun. Had a lot of fun, but very happy to be back here with you guys.
Lot to talk about today, including the Caitlin Clark story is a big one nationally, and we're going to get into that, and we're going to do so here very quickly. But I will offer this one, and obviously IndyCar in Detroit over the weekend. It was mayhem yesterday. I was in turn 3, which was the turn that seemingly every lap and every restart there was an incident, including at the start of the race. But Scott Dixon doing Scott Dixon things, winning the race, and really strong run from Marcus Ericsson to get back to second. Marcus Armstrong finishing third. Honda 1-2-3 in the Chevy Grand Prix of Detroit in front of the Chevrolet headquarters. The kitten, for those that are curious, and if you aren't, then please bear with me because we'll make it quick. But if you weren't listening to the program on Friday, I got to work on Friday, heard a noise, popped the hood of my car, and there in the bowels of my engine, and I'm talking it was way down there, and people were like, I can't believe you'd have to call the fire department. Well, first off, I had to go to work. I had to come up here and do the show. So we had a team of coworkers, and thank you to Sienna in our promotions department, to Cam, our engineer, to Corbin and Eddie, and to Leah, who is a sales assistant, that all kind of group efforted monitoring this poor kitten. Eventually, the fire department was able to come. They had some of the equipment to get it out. It moved from my car. At one point, it jumped. It found its way out of my car and ran into another car that happened to be Corbin's. We did get the kitten out. Leah, who is clearly a saint and knows a lot about cats, took him home. He had a burn on his nose and his lip, presumably from the engine, and she gave him 3 flea baths because he was covered in fleas and he had ear mange. She got all of that taken care of. Took him to a vet to also be looked over and do a chip on him. They estimate that he is 5 to 6 weeks old.
Man.
He basically was starved, so he's been eating a lot. She is currently tending to him and taking care of him, and said it is literally the sweetest kitten. She was like, he is the most affectionate cat. He's already litter box trained. So we now are in the process of finding, and I've talked to a few people, finding a good home for him. And I will insist that nothing against the shelters. That's where I got Boo. But we are going to make sure he's already been through enough living in the engine of a car and riding with me in the car in the engine for, 5 miles. So been through enough.
I've ridden in the car with you before, and I can't imagine being in the engine. I mean, at least I had a seatbelt.
Think about that, though. Like when I'm stopping, I'm braking, I'm going down the ramps. Anyway, so I've named him, by the way. Obviously, whoever gets the cat can take on a new name, right?
Firestone?
There were several options, right? Firestone was one. Somebody said Cruise, which I think was really good, but I usually like 2 syllables for a cat so that you can, mix up the way you name them.
Cato?
Kata Award was a popular suggestion. My sister actually came up with this, and then I thought about the double meaning of it. So Leah was telling me that he was really, really shy and intimidating at first because he hissed and everything else. And then once he came out of his shell, he's just a total sweet, loving guy, right? So if you've ever read To Kill a Mockingbird, my cat, which was already named when I got him, is named Boo. Boo Radley is the character that is like everybody's afraid of him. Then they find out that he's actually this sweet, big-hearted fellow who's just shy. And I like the fact that the first syllable is Rad because the way that we met him is a pretty rad story. So Radley is his name.
Good stuff.
So he is Radley. So
That's
we
great.
have Boo and we have Radley. I don't think they're going to be roommates, but we'll find out. Now, Caitlin Clark, this is a huge story. And I think everyone knows by now that the physicality and the level of play of Caitlin Clark now being knocked to the ground. I think it's starting to affect her play. And there are a lot of opinions, a lot of insights as to how and why we are here. I think that people thought that Caitlin Clark being drafted into the WNBA by the Fever when matched with Aaliyah Boston was literally immediately going to be Shaq and Kobe Lakers 2000. And that obviously has not been the case of yet. I had noticed, and I'd mentioned on this show, that in watching Caitlin Clark at Iowa, I thought at times her body language to her teammates was terrible. I don't think that makes her a bad teammate. Certainly doesn't make her a bad player or person. But there are a couple of things that I find interesting. The narrative in terms of coaches that were once players, more often than not, great players, and I'm talking about like Hall of Fame level players, more often than not, it doesn't translate into elite level coaches. Oftentimes, the best coaches were average players. And if you look at, now Larry Bird would be the anomaly, although he had a veteran team to deal with. But if you look at Magic Johnson, you look at Wayne Gretzky, you look at Isaiah Thomas, players that were light years ahead of their peers on the floor or the field or the rink, don't always translate to great coaches. And the reason why is because I think it is difficult for them, because what made them great players is they always saw and anticipated the game a step or two ahead of everyone else on the floor or the rink or the field. And it was instinctive to them. Wayne Gretzky, in playing hockey, didn't have to think through the game per se. I'm not saying he didn't, but it was more instinctive to him than it was to Mark Messier. Magic Johnson on the floor running a break didn't have to think through like, okay, I'm going to look left and pass right. It was instinctive to him. So those people naturally assume that it's instinctive to everyone else. And when they are coaching a game, they are envisioning and outlining things under the assumption that everyone else has the same instantaneous acumen of athleticism that they did. And I think that makes it challenging for them. And Caitlin Clark, to a great extent, in college, had the same thing happening. She, at times, would throw dimes, as the kids say, or no-look passes, or perfect passes that her teammates weren't always anticipating. And if they did not finish the play, Caitlin Clark's frustration would manifest. And you would see her body language was terrible. Not all the time, and not malicious, to my knowledge. I don't know her. I'm not in the huddles. But outside observation, that's how it appears. Now, if I notice that about Caitlin Clark, then you can bet that players in the WNBA or players that played against her in college that are now in the WNBA absolutely noticed it as well. But that, combined with ladies in the WNBA that have been playing for a handful of years, making good money, but not elite money. And then all they see in the headlines for the last 6 weeks is Caitlin Clark with a shoe contract, Caitlin Clark with a Gatorade contract, Caitlin Clark on the side of the Hyatt, Caitlin Clark, the lead topic on national talk shows. And there is a natural resentment there because those players look at it and go, look, this ain't a team player. I saw her at Iowa. Now, I'm not saying she isn't. I'm saying perception in the eyes of her opponent. But also resentment because she is a rookie that hasn't earned her stripes in the mind of those players. What was interesting to me was when Caitlin Clark was the spearhead of the shift from WNBA, at least the Indiana Fever teams, from going from flying commercial to flying charter. And the first video that was released of the Fever celebrating flying charter, Caitlin Clark was sitting in the front right of the plane with no one sitting next to her. Now, most players did have an open seat next to them. Obviously, you have that luxury to do that. But she was sitting up near the execs and coaches, and then as the person walked down the aisle, then you see the rest of the team kind of behind her. I don't know the Fever players. It would be totally irresponsible and presumptuous of me to factually say that they themselves have, like, not a resentment, but a cooling period that has yet to totally embrace this rookie phenom into their roster. But perception is there that that's the case. And to me, with Caitlin Clark in this situation of players being overly aggressive and physical towards her, Jimmy, the bigger issue from a local standpoint is not even necessarily the root, the genesis, or the cause of this malicious nature towards her on the court, but rather the hesitation, it would seem, of her teammates running to her rescue. That, to me, is peculiar. Now, maybe that is just, and I don't mean this misogynistically at all, but maybe that's the difference between like a men's league and a women's league. Is a men's league, a reaction is to immediately like jump in and tempers flare. Maybe women are simply better at channeling that emotion. That's possible. But I think it's telling that when she gets knocked on her side and there are teammates right there, yes, they did go over to help her up. Don't get me wrong. But there didn't seem to be the immediate reaction of like, what are you doing
What
here?
we're used to when the flagrant one foul that ends up being upgraded to a flagrant one that happened over the weekend, and the conversation nationally has been, where were the teammates? Where was everybody to back up Caitlin? Do you need an enforcer? There's been all kinds of conversations about what the proper reaction is. But to what you're saying, Jake, and I agree with you in this regard, at least based on that one example, and just from my consumption for the large majority of my sports fandom, whether it's Pacers, whether it's National NBA basketball, if there was a shove or a play like that to a player that was in your star tier category, you would see 3 or 4 people immediately running over there. We would have the fake benches clearing. Hey,
Right.
why'd you do that? Hey, why'd you do that? And then there would be 5 minutes of delay, and then everything would separate. And you're not seeing as much of that. My bigger issue, because I'm with you. We're not in those locker rooms. We don't know the Fever personnel. We don't know the dichotomy of the locker room. I would agree with you that it's reckless to think that there is anything more than, just perhaps the day-to-day operations of life in the WNBA versus there's locker room turmoil or heavy level resentment. I think some envy would be natural given the fact of how quickly her status elevates from being the dominant player she was in the college game to then all of this stuff arriving for her as a number 1 overall pick before she's done anything in the W. That said, my bigger issue has been not what's happening internally with the Fever as much as it appears on a game-to-game basis that it's more than just the Fever had a tough schedule and naturally you're going to get the best shot from every team that you play against because it's going to be a nationally televised game, or because all this hype is around Caitlin Clark and you want to be the team to beat them, or you didn't want to be the team to lose the first game to the Fever. They've now won 2 games, but that was a conversation. You don't want to be the first team to take an L to this group when everybody's piling on and piling on. My bigger issue has been around the league, like the entire league. There's not been a level of embrace or of, hey, this could be a future superstar of our league. And like it or not, more people are interested in the sport since her arrival. I'm not saying that there was not a clear ascension in popularity in the WNBA before Caitlin Clark. There clearly was. The league has been trending up. But you're getting all kinds of eyeballs, all kinds of commentary that you didn't get before, even as recently as 3 months ago, because she's there. And the overall reaction around the league is either roughing her up a bit in games or unnecessary not basketball plays, or in other examples, and sometimes it's the same example, is questioning her toughness or questioning the player that she is. Like, the league itself, charter flights, interest in the sport, coverage of the sport, it had all been increasing year over year. But the exclamation point of it is her arrival into the W. and you're getting tons of more interest around the sport than you did before because of her. Then you combine that with what you brought up, which is the public's thought that she was going to immediately light the league on fire and there were not going to be growing pains like every rookie should deserve. You have those arrive when people thought it was going to be Kobe, Shaq, like you mentioned, and now it's, oh, does she belong in the league? And, oh, look, why are they giving all this money to her? And there's a level of jealousy and toxicity across the sport that is hard to digest, especially when maybe stuff like that was always going on, but now it's underneath a bigger lamp or microscope because of her popularity and because of the sport's popularity.
Jimmy, when I was in college, in my freshman year, I went to the University of Kansas. And when I went to the University of Kansas, I pledged a fraternity. I had met the people from that fraternity during the process of determining I'm going to go to the University of Kansas. And then in the summertime, I went for Rush and, whatever. Because I was in that fraternity as a pledge, and I look back now, and this is like, I'm like, what in the world? But I left for school 3 weeks before school began. So school started at University of Kansas like at the end of August or whatever. I left like the last week in July, I think, to move to Lawrence and live with my pledge class in the fraternity house. And, it was the whole like fraternity bonding, whatever else. And for the first 3 weeks, myself and my pledge brothers our job was to get the fraternity house ready for the school year. And they got us up I look back, of course, now I look back, I'm like, why in the world did I even do that? But regardless, we got up every morning and, at 7 a.m. or whatever, and we were doing landscaping and polishing doorknobs and vacuuming and shingling the house, you name it, right? I mean, it was all part of that process, I guess, right? But it was not fun. It was a lot of hard work. It wasn't fun, but regardless. Then the school year begins, and our pledge class, we had 2 open spots. So at that point, they did the fall rush, and we had 2 pledges in our pledge class. So our team, if you will, for people that aren't in the fraternity lifestyle, joined us, and they were immediately brought in as, okay, these are the last 2 members of your pledge class. They went through the typical fall rush as opposed to the summer rush, but you guys are now all still part of the same freshman team, okay? But I remember about 3 weeks into the school year, we were doing another thing of chores or whatever, and one of those 2 guys that joined late, that the rest of us had like almost a 4-week head start of work over, was like yapping about like he didn't want to do his job that day or mow the lawn or whatever it was. And I was the one that snapped because I was at my breaking point. And I snapped because I'm like, dude, like, are you kidding me? Like, do you know what we've been through? You're unhappy about this? And we've been doing this for 4 weeks, man. Like, pull your weight because you're not qualified to come in here and tell me how bad it is for you when you don't know what we've been through for the last month before you arrived on the scene.
They don't have the tenure. They don't have the tenure to talk about. Yeah.
And I think there are players in the WNBA with Caitlin Clark that look at her having, at no fault of hers whatsoever and at no foul of hers. I think there are players that look at her and automatically have the resentment because they're like, you're going to come in here and immediately get on charter flights and get 7-figure endorsement contracts when we've been toiling around forever. I've been here 5 years in this league. I've been here 5 years, and I'm just now making 6 figures. And you come in making 7 figures right away, and you're going to sulk because you threw a bad pass? Or you're going to bark at me because you stole the ball from me? You haven't earned that right. Now, I'm not saying that these people, that the other players are correct. And I'm not saying that she merits or deserves that sentiment. But I think there's an element of human nature that goes into play with that, and she is the victim of a human nature resentment over you haven't earned the right at this point to be able to get everything that we feel we are owed. Now, she has, don't get me wrong, and she herself and those other players should theoretically be grateful for all the attention, and eventually one would hope that turns into the money that she is bringing to the league itself. But for right now, I think there is that resentment because it's like you have not earned that right just yet, and we resent it a little bit, so we're going to show you where we've been. It wasn't easy for us, so we're going to make sure it isn't easy for you.
I think that there is a balancing act to that, though. The half of what you're talking about of not making it easier for her on the court, of bullying her a little bit, of making it harder, and she acknowledged this as well afterwards, talking about growing up with two brothers, things being very physical. She's prepared for it. She doesn't expect anything easy for her. That's one thing. When it then elevates off the court for comments against her or comments publicly when she is a large part of why the league has gotten increased coverage this season, why the acceleration happened with not just nationally televised games, but it's not really a coincidence that it coincides with them getting better treatment for travel and charter flights. There's a fine line there between making her really earn it and bullying her around on a basketball court and doing it publicly where it makes you look like a tool.
No, totally fair. Totally fair. But
yes, she has to earn her stripes at the end of the day.
And, at some point.
And I think she knows that. I don't think that's lost on her. I mean, I can't combat, nor do I really want to necessarily, what you've mentioned about body language and all that, but at least publicly what she says in pressers, I don't think she's surprised by anything that's happened at this point.
Another thing, to be honest with you, and look, I think she's great. I love, you guys will remember, when Caitlin Clark announced that she was going pro, I came in the next day, we were at the Combine, and I'm like, this is our lead right now. This is huge. I'm not saying that because what I'm saying is I've been on board with her. My dad texts me, when are the Fever playing next? My parents enjoy watching it. I love everything that it brings to the table. I also think that it would behoove the Fever, and I don't mean this selfishly speaking. I'm not saying about this show. I'm not saying about John's or with KB and Andy or even local news, whatever. I think at some point it would behoove the Fever, if they want people to truly rally around, which I think they're going to, but if they want people to truly rally around Caitlin Clark, we need to start feeling more like Caitlin Clark is indeed part of Indianapolis as opposed to a national brand that just happens to live here.
Yeah.
I don't know yet that people really have embraced that Caitlin Clark is one of us because we haven't seen her necessarily be one of us.
And to that end, and why I would balance off of that to say that the Fever haven't fully had the opportunity to, and the city hasn't had the opportunity to, you're only just now coming off that Pacers playoff run.
No, you're right. That's fair.
If we're still talking about this in a month where it feels like that, because you're right, there is a foreign vibe to it of you're not from here and you have all this national allure on you. Are you just a tenant or are you a part of the city? They haven't had a full opportunity to do that because of the Pacers, 500, everything else that's been dominant in the conversation.
That's probably true, but it's not like you see her going in and maybe I'm wrong, but going on with, Scott Swan and doing a sit down with them or coming on here or, with Hagan or whatever it may be, right? You don't see that yet. And maybe you're right. Maybe that comes in time. We'll continue the conversation. Big show lined up for you, by the way. Scott Agness is going to join us 1 o'clock today. We got Mike Chappell coming up at 2 o'clock. Apparently we've got to take new photos for the Colts. I'm excited about that. And Joel A. Erickson didn't realize that he hit reply all to the email from the Colts asking us to do that. So Joel now everybody is aware of Joel A. Erickson's schedule, which is kind of cool within the local media. But
I'm sure he's cackling about that.
When we come back, I brought you guys gifts. I was in Detroit. I was at IndyCar. We'll recap that as well, and we'll continue talking about Caitlin Clark. But the weekend adventures from both sides of us, including gifts brought back and one of our favorite fun games to play. One of our favorite fun food. And Todd Meyer's going to lose his mind. We're not going to eat on the air, Todd, I promise you. But we're going to do taste tests because I brought back gifts for you guys. And Jimmy, I think
I also brought back some gifts.
You brought back something from the Howard Johnsons where you were sequestered, right?
I did, yes.
Did you bring back a Howard Johnson's coaster?
I brought back the mints they left on the pillow.
I love that. All right. Speaking of mints, I brought some of those too. We'll explain.
Roto-Rooter. Plumbing problem? No.
You know, the extended LP version of this song begins by talking about a car accident in the city of Detroit. Fictional, mind you. And pretty fitting, I guess, considering yesterday's carnage in the IndyCar race in Detroit, which, I'll be honest, this is probably unpopular opinion, and I'm not saying this to carry the water of IndyCar, because from a racing standpoint, I get it. But I think I figured out that was my 253rd race that I've called.
Nice.
Congratulations.
I think that's right. I maybe it's anyway somewhere in that ballpark, right? And a lot of times with street race, I mean, admittedly, after a while, you know, there's some of those races. I mean, you're saying the same thing over and over, you know, 10 different ways, right? I was located in turn 3 yesterday, which I'm not going to say the name of it, but the building behind me. So I was on a scissor lift in turn 3. And behind me was a building with a huge, kind of like a bell tower. And it was a building that is a religion. It's a religious group. And they're known for handing out booklets and asking people to do like exams and tests about stress in their life. And they had a tent set up there. And I didn't take any of the literature, but I saw several people that did and got free hats and T-shirts out of it. But so that was behind me. But then in front of me was turn 3, which is very tight in Detroit. And it just is too tight, truthfully, for probably 2 cars to go past. There were, I think, 9 cautions. Lap 1, there was, I think there were like 8 cars collected. So I had a busy day. I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was fun because you just never knew what was going to happen. And it was a crazy race where Scott Dixon ends up winning the race, and Will Power gets caught in lap number 1 and is in last place after a lap and then comes back and finishes 6th after making 7 pit stops. I mean, it was a crazy race. That race typically was on Belle Isle. Belle Isle is fabulous. It's beautiful. I get it. But I also understand that part of the reasoning of moving it to the streets of Jefferson Avenue in downtown Detroit is to showcase the city of Detroit, because that's Roger Penske's home city. And, you know, the Chevrolet headquarters are right there. The General Motors headquarters is right there in the Renaissance Center, and it goes right past all of that. So I understand. And for Detroit, and I've been really down on the city of Detroit over the years, but I'll give Detroit credit.
Was it because of all the buzz of 300,000 people being at that race, falling off of the draft?
775,000 at the draft,
right,
and then they got 400,000 there for the race. That's correct.
Because that level of humanity combined with an event like that, I think you're automatically going to have a carryover of emotion.
Well,
and excitement.
there were 50,000 at the race just from the people that were still walking back from the draft. But but Detroit is a city that I have seen, you know, over the years trying its hardest to come back, and they've had a lot of tough times in Detroit. But there are some cool areas of it. We stayed at the Motor City Casino, which was, the hotel room was great. The casino's cool. But there are bottle works type areas in a couple of different regions of downtown Detroit that are pretty cool. And it's an older city for certain, but I understand and I appreciate, you know, using sporting events, including IndyCar, to try to bolster back the economy of Detroit. So during the race itself, the race was Sunday. Saturday had some free time. So as I always do, because where the race is, I could see the tunnel to Canada is right there. I mean, literally right there. You have to drive it, not walk it. So I ventured over into Canada, and as always, have brought you guys back little treats and trinkets. Now,
is this going to be like the shrimp chips?
Jimmy, you also have things to give away. We're going to do that later, right?
Yeah. I will tell the audience, though, based on the size of the bag.
Well, now here's the thing.
And to be clear, size doesn't matter. That's the question, right? So Jake's bag is bigger here, so I
made several stops while in Windsor.
Okay.
Made several stops. I went and saw my man Fauci, who is the cigar store owner that I've known to love over the years. And I really wanted to get a Bolivar. Prices have skyrocketed, and of course, I'm on a little bit of a different heart regimen, but I had to stop and see
Sure.
Fauci. Then I wanted to go to a grocery store. So I type into I went to the Roots out. Now here's another problem, by the way, and I need your guys' help here. I went to the Roots outlet. Roots, the greatest clothing store ever. Went to the Roots outlet. I bought a shirt that I really liked. Got home, and then last night, because I was going to wear it today, it still has the theft tag on it.
Oh.
I'm like, well, what do I do? I have the receipt, so it proves that I did buy it.
I feel like this is just a theory. I could be wrong.
Are those one size fits all? Can I go to the Gap
That's
here
what
and
I'm
they'll
gonna
take
say.
it off?
If you went to like a Gap or a Target and you show your receipt of, hey, I bought this at this store
In Canada, mind you. They don't
but
have it
you
here.
have a proof of
Right,
purchase.
right.
Assuming it's universal, would they then take it off? Because if you just brought it without a receipt, I feel like they'd be like, sorry,
Totally.
man, we're not helping you. But
Yeah.
maybe with a receipt,
I
they
have
would
the
do
receipt,
it.
so
I don't
that
know.
helps. But at any rate, when I went to the grocery store, the closest grocery store was a Walmart. And I get up there for the self-checkout, and I'm like, yeah, I need bags. And they're like, well, this is Canada, dude. We don't throw away plastic and paper
Right.
bags. You have to buy a bag. So I did get a beautiful big Walmart bag.
By the way, to your point, and I can't believe I omitted this detail. I apologize.
Eduardo,
Aren't they bags?
Oh, nice.
now you guys
This
have
is
had
what I
these
was
before,
hoping
right?
for.
Yes, but
I have not.
The thing about the,
Eddie, I'd like for you, these are the ketchup-flavored Lay's potato chips.
I have had
These
those.
are not available in the United States, and they are. Now, do you like ketchup, Eddie?
Yes.
Do you like tomato?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who doesn't
These are
like-
strangely addictive.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you that I brought you guys each back. For myself, 64 bags I bought.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
I wanted to throw in to continue the bit. By the way, in regards to the security tag being on your shirt, sometimes that has ink in it. It was actually a fire alarm that was pulled, and the guy had tried to take a security
Really?
tag off his shirt. That's where the ink had come from. So
In your
the
bank-
bank robbery
Okay.
case, so that was another reason for the
I
acquittal.
opened the bag and it smells like ketchup. It's fabulous.
Okay, now, Eddie, you may be saying to yourself once you eat your ketchup potato chips that you want to wash away that flavoring, even though you won't want to because they are fantastic. Eddie has tried the ketchup potato chips
Oh, yeah.
from Canada.
Yep.
Your thoughts?
These are way better than the shrimp chips.
They're unbelievable, aren't
Yes,
they? They're
yes.
so addictive. Jimmy is now trying his. He's gotten the crunch there. Jimmy, your thoughts?
That's delightful. That's delightful.
Okay, now, because I am a thoughtful guy, I brought you back. Roots is the greatest clothing store in all of North America, but it's only in Canada. They tried it in the United States, didn't work, but it's great. And literally probably 40% of my wardrobe is Roots Canada. But they also have the best mints ever. Have I ever brought you guys back because last year when I did the show and had to go to Toronto, I was still doing the morning show. So I don't think
No,
that
we've not received mints from
Okay.
you before. Is
We
this a
haven't.
hint, by the way? Or are you saying that, hey, listen?
No,
guys,
no,
you
no.
gotta- Okay, all right.
No, these are just great.
No,
These
the
are
breath
I
was
have
too
the
bad.
I have the
Okay.
Roots Canada maple mints for you because what better feels like Canada than some maple syrup? Look at Eddie already reaching here. Now, I also have the Roots Canada blueberry maple, which you're going to think you are eating blueberry pancakes with maple on them. So,
Okay.
Eddie, here you go. Jimmy, here are your two.
Thank you.
But before you completely neutralize your palate with that, I've done the always popular game, which maybe we'll do more so in the break, of let's try Canadian candy that you can't get in the United States. Now, these are actually probably just candy bars that are
Have you
available.
tried
in the
these
United
already?
States. I have not.
So you don't know if they're
Ooh.
better than Tim Tams yet or not? Because that was the last sweet
Correct.
treat that we
Oh,
got.
those
And those
were
were
great.
magical.
Those are great. Now, I have the Nestle Mirage. And I would encourage you to look quickly at it because you
I don't know
never
if that's real or not.
That's right. The Nestle Mirage. Now, this is what it says. Real bubbly milk chocolate. Chocolate au lait autre mousse. I'm guessing this is essentially a Three Musketeers. But, Eddie, what I need you to do is to we can't – no fingering on these. You got to break it with the –
Sorry?
Yeah, that came off wrong, right? No finger swipe on, no touching
Okay.
directly on the candy bar. You got to use the wrapper when breaking it up into thirds. Next, I have and this one here. This candy bar to me is fascinating. This is from Nielsen. It has the Canadian logo on it and everything. This is Jersey milk. Now, I don't know if
Any
that,
relation to Jersey Mike's
well,
or no? We think
I
so,
think
maybe?
because it's from Jersey, it probably is chocolate with a little bit of extra cheese. I don't know. This candy bar immediately.
That counts as an import for
hey,
Canada?
how you doing? You know, like I'm telling you, I'm the best candy bar here. Like that other Mirage is a faker.
It's somehow
Right?
an import and an export for Canada at the same time.
That's right. So that's the Jersey milk. And then this one is the one that's most intriguing to me. And I know this is fabulous radio, but we've done this before, and kids love it.
Where'd the Mirage go, by the way?
Exactly. I don't know. Where did it go? This here is now Eddie's mixing up
I was
going
going
to
to ask if
tea.
it mixed with the chai tea or not, but okay.
No,
continue.
this is my macho tea.
This one I'm
Get it
very
right.
intrigued by.
Okay.
This is the O. Henry bar,
Looks like a Easter time Reese's from afar.
a common O. Henry bar, right?
The color, not the shape. It does not look
This
like an
is
egg.
the O. Henry Reese's Level Up Mix Up Mashup. Reese's peanut butter,
Oh, it really
pretzel
has Reese's
caramel,
in it.
and chocolatey coating avec berry, brésil, caramel, and grosse chocolat. Yes.
Does that say something about me that I recognize the
That-
Reese's color orange from afar? I
That
feel like
is
that's
a
what that
little
says.
bit disturbing. Now, I think basically this is a Canadian Take 5.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
So
Now,
we-
how do
we-
they say that though? Oh, Henry, or is it Oh Henry? Like, how do you think the inflection is on the
Well, the O.
commercials
Henry
for that?
candy. All I know is this: the heiress to this candy bar just walks around bra, no blouse. I know that much. So I guess during the break we will try these out and we will figure out which one's best, and we'll try to use more politically correct terms in how we're going to break up. said
I
candy
only
bar.
got you guys one gift each, by the way, so I apologize.
Well, these aren't exactly elaborate. I mean,
They're
don't get me
not.
wrong.
You're right.
What did you think of the ketchup chips?
Wonderful.
I'm telling you.
Like very, very tasty.
Like, here's what we need to do, guys. The $1 million idea, and I've already trademarked Wine in Indiana. I have the email to prove it, by the way, so nobody get feisty. The other thing that I'm going to trademark is these ketchup potato chips in the U.S. I want to start my own import-export business,
Okay.
and I'm going to import Lay's ketchup potato chips, and we will retire because they're unbelievable.
He hasn't seen me yet since I've been back from the trial/vacation. So just so we get to see Todd real quick one time.
He's going to be in here. For sure.
That's actually the second time, Jimmy.
Nobody wants to hear you eat on the air.
Yeah.
We know this. But they are fantastic, and I am proud to say that in my residence right now, I am the proud owner of 62 bags. I bought 64 of them. You guys get 2. I have 62 at
Are you
home.
being legit right now? I can't tell.
Did you see the size of the bag?
I did, yeah.
Let me tell you something. My fuel efficiency on the way back from Detroit, very bogged down by the weight
Did
in the
they
trunk.
stamp you, by the way?
I also got 2 cases of Alexander Keith's beer from my buddy Rob
I'll
Lynch.
withdraw the question. I have a
No.
question for you when we come back from the break.
Okay, sounds good.
for the rest of the segment, I think.
What the hell just happened?
Jake's mic just collapsed off of
was
his
unbelievable.
mic
We're
arm.
breaking stuff.
I mean, I know that
Can I get one Let's Get Ready to Rumble, please? No? All right.
the mic basically turned into the what was the name of that the Mirage Bar,
Yes.
right? By the way, since I'm holding this microphone and making it look like a golf club currently, if you want to see my golf swing or that of Andy Sweeney, who, by the way, my understanding is, unlike the Indianapolis 500 for this event, Andy will stick around for the whole thing. JMV will be there as well. We will be there talking about the Fan on the Back Nine Golf Tournament presented by Franciscan Health, our friends at Franciscan, Thursday, July 18th. It's going to be at Back Nine, which is
It's a
Back
fabulous
Nine is
place.
awesome.
The
Yeah.
view itself of the city from there
great.
is spectacular. The
It's great.
people are awesome. Last year we had a great time.
They got great food there. They've got drinks, whether it be soft drinks, beer, whatever you might need. Everything getting underway at 11 o'clock, and then officially the golf begins at noon, talking about the Fan Golf outing on July 18th at Back Nine, presented by Franciscan Health and benefiting Franciscan Health Foundation. Tickets are now available and on sale at 1075thefan.com. That's 1075thefan.com, the station website. They're available. Jimmy, you said you had a question for me.
Yeah,
Correct?
so when I went to London with my wife in December,
Yep.
they don't when we came back from London and when we got to London, most of it's all digitized now, so they don't do stamps anymore, which I liked the passport stamp thing.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, in that quick trip across
So,
the
great
border,
question.
did they stamp you? or
I'm
no?
with you. Great question. Now, a couple of things that are interesting. This is not applicable in London, but when we were, for example, when we were in Spain and went from there to Italy, and I was super excited to also get Italy stamped on my passport, and that they didn't do because it's all part of the European Union. So you don't need a passport
Right.
to get from one European country to the next. It doesn't apply with England. When I went into Canada on Saturday, I said to the guy, "Can you stamp my passport?" Because I'm like a 10-year-old, and I love having all the stamps on there. And he said, "I can't because now technically if we stamp it, it means that you have residency for 6 weeks in Canada."
Okay.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he told me.
Well, considering the fact that still to this day, and this happened to me on the way back, the flight home yesterday, I asked the TSA agent, "Hey, do I need to take the laptop out?" He goes, "Yes, you do. But the line that they sent me to, you did not need to take it on." So if they don't know about that section, they definitely don't know
You
what
don't
the
have
stamps
TSA
mean.
pre-approved, right?
I don't. I've thought about it. I go back and forth. I've
tell you.
heard if you travel a lot, especially if you have kids, which we don't yet, but we will, it's a must-have.
Totally.
I've yet to do it, though.
It's one of those things that you buy it one time, and the one time that you actually utilize and need it, you're like, that
Worth
was
every
worth
penny,
it,
yeah.
every penny of it.
So you
But-
didn't get stamped when you went to Amsterdam, is what you're saying?
So we did. When I went to
Oh, not-
Amsterdam,
Not with the passport agent.
That's good.
They,
Yeah.
that's right. They did stamp. I've had to ask though, but when I came back to the U.S. I was only in Canada for a couple of hours, long enough to get some Jersey milk. How you doing? Hey, try the Jersey milk candy bar. I'm telling you, it's the best from Nielsen. And we're gonna try that next. But when I came back into the U.S., I asked the same thing: "Can you stamp it?" And the guy said, "No, we don't do that anymore." He actually looked around. He's like, "I don't even have a stamp on me, or else I probably would, but I don't have it."
I
on me."
can't confirm this. One of my guesses would be that went away during COVID because I still got a stamp as recently as like 2018. I'm assuming at some point they just decided, hey.
Usually, most places I've gone, because they say, they're like, "What are you, 10?" But usually, if I ask, they have it right there and they'll do it if you ask for it. Scott Agness up next. We will talk not only about kind of his overall impressions of the Pacers exit interviews, but the bigger story really is the Fever and the Caitlin Clark situation with the rest of the WNBA. And I think it's curious, and I think other people have noticed it. Her teammates not necessarily coming to her defense, at least as outwardly as one would assume. That discussion next.
The Ride with JM.
I think the Beatles is for you there, Jake. We've successfully reestablished your mic into the mic arm, but I believe Eddie always playing a show within a show there is going with Little Beatles.
The Beatles. Do you like the Beatles? That's my... I don't know if you know this or not, but I do a fabulous British impersonation.
All of we could do it, Jake. I was in Epcot for a little bit. Honestly, you could do an accent for every
I was
trip
in
around
Canada,
there.
and I got some Jersey milk. That's right, the Jersey milk. That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying.
Did you get any Guinness?
Jake, for somebody that survived a Widowmaker, you're extremely careless with your diet. I think you'd be more careful.
He had
Drink
like
energy,
an eighth of a candy bar.
Energy drinks and potato chips. It's scary to hear that.
Well, you didn't have any potato chips.
I appreciate that, but
the tone of that's one of those where you never know tone. The tone of that matters to me. Because on the one hand, I would appreciate it if it's meant out of the kindness of your heart. If it's meant as a jab, then I'm like, man, he had an eighth of a candy bar. What are we doing here?
Well, I get it. I mean, there's...
One is caring, one is being a jerk.
Everything in moderation.
Sure.
And I do find it important to try to be an example for people in terms of heart health.
Sure.
And
if that means you need to give Eddie and I 20 ketchup Lay's potato chip bags each to remove the guilt from your conscience, then we'll gladly do that for you.
If people really believe that I brought back 62 bags of ketchup potato chips.
It was only 40, guys. Calm down.
That's right. But
heart health is serious. I'm not trying to undercut
unbelievably fortunate that I survived a Widowmaker, and truthfully, and I am the first to admit, it is 100% because I am narcissistic about my appearance, but my lifestyle is what allowed me, immediate medical attention, and the fact that I was fortunate to be close allowed me to survive that. But my lifestyle is because of the fact that my diet is almost exclusively salads and grilled chicken, and I run 25 miles a week, and my fitness level BMI are what allowed me to survive that. I'm incredibly fortunate. I'm aware of it. But yes, I have a cardiologist I speak to like almost weekly, and everything in moderation. So
and additionally, for those
if I
that
want to enjoy some ketchup potato chips, I'm going to.
For those that don't know, Jake is, me and Eddie don't necessarily know you well, like compared to others, but for those that don't know Jake as well, you prepare for everything. So yes, those conversations are undoubtedly happening to make sure that you are on a proper health plan.
You prepared for today's show?
Joining us now, he covers the Pacers for Fieldhouse Files. He is Scott Agness. We're going to cover a lot here with Scott. Always good to catch up with you, my friend. I want to start first with a slightly outside market that pertains to in-market question. Josh Hart taking further shots at the Pacers, the ultimate level of sour grapes with them losing in 7, but calling out the Pacers for not getting a game against the Celtics. I don't really care necessarily about him saying that, but the idea of Pacers-Knicks having relevancy in off-season chatter and vitriol, good for the league and good for those two franchises, or bad?
Yeah, of course it's good for the league. The fact that the friendly banter there. You got to remember that Tyrese had so much experience with Josh, with Brunson during Team USA. So I think that's them having fun with each other.
You think it's playful? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're good friends because of all that. They were going out to dinner. Their girlfriends, wives were all involved. That's friendly banter that they're jabbing one another.
Scott, in terms of, before we get to the Fever, because I want to talk a lot about that, but to kind of put a tie on, I guess, the Pacers season, just in terms of exit interviews, I think we all know Siakam is likely going to be retained unless something crazy happens, but was there anything that really stood out at you in terms of players on their way out, or just perceptions, roles, guys that may be seeing elevated roles going into the offseason? What jumped out at you in the transition once the year began and the dust settled?
Yeah, I think the primary focus...
Or the year ended, sorry.
Yeah, where does Ben fit in with all this, right? Because Andrews played in an elevated role and lived up to the billing, and he's done it on both ends of the floor. And so that's going to become the biggest question outside of Siakam is at what level can he contribute? Like, can you imagine Ben coming off the bench, but yet at the same time, Nembhard's played so much of a complete game and taken on oftentimes the biggest defensive assignment that it's hard to relegate him back to a backup point guard position. Yet at the same time, maybe you put the ball in Andrews' hands more often and allow Ty to play off the ball. So I think those are kind of the biggest questions I had going into this offseason.
Scott, I've always viewed the Benedict Mathurin selection, and while due to a number of different circumstances, I didn't have the inroads that our friend Kevin Bowen did of build the statue and all of that stuff.
Right.
I wanted him to be selected by the Pacers. I fell in love with him during that NCAA tournament run with Arizona. I believe that he has that takeover mantra within him where at times when playoff basketball shifts towards isolation, even in a system that isn't solely based on that, I don't think the Pacers would, with Benedict Mathurin in the playoffs, had he been there, have suddenly switched to isolation basketball. But to have somebody that can go get you a bucket, I believe he is a bucket getter. I believe he has to develop into the type of player that was worthy of their selection and be a starter for this team moving forward. To that end, how should it be read if that does not happen out of the gate next year? If it is another process of bringing him along as the sixth man off the bench and it's not until after the All-Star break that he is a starter? Or do you think, because you alluded to it a little bit in your last answer, like I do, which is that with him being as valuable of a piece to this franchise as he needs to be, for that draft pick to have been successful and for them to be on the proper path to elevating to the next level, he has to be in a starting role from near get-go for me. Do you view it as that same level of he has to be there, or is it okay and panic buttons don't need to be pressed if he's a sixth man like he was for most of the year this year out of the gate next season?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he begins as that sixth man just because you can't carry on with what we saw in the postseason. Yet, at the same time, where they missed the most about him was his ball creation, his ability to get to the basket and get to the free throw line. Even Siakam's number dropped significantly in his ability to get to the free throw line when transitioning from Toronto here to Indiana. But for the long term, you would really love for Ben to expand his game, to finally take some pride in what he does on the defensive end. And what we do know from years past, though, is Rick Carlisle is not going to give up or concede any positions. He's going to make you earn it. That was the phrase reiterated by so many of them over the last couple of years. So I don't think he's automatically slotted into that starting guard spot. But you would expect for him to have a productive summer as best he can. And ultimately, you hope, begin the year in that starting guard spot. Now, he will be limited a little bit this summer as he rehabs this shoulder injury after having surgery, but the Pacers say he's a couple months ahead of time, so that bodes well for where he's going. But I think the biggest thing right now is just the stock of Andrew Nembhard and being able to depend on him at both ends of the floor and him being able to step up and be that competitor and take on those bigger assignments. This was a huge role for him to take on as someone and I think you saw his IQ, and I think you saw him being a four-year guy in college. You saw the benefits of that when it came big time there in the postseason.
Will we reach a point, and perhaps we did, and I just missed it, Scott, so I apologize on that end, as Jake documented, jury trial that I had to go through,
That's right.
plus vacation. So if I lost this within all of that eventful week, then I apologize. When will we officially get word, if we haven't already, of Tyrese Halliburton in Paris in July and his availability for the Olympics and Team USA?
Yeah, right now Tyrese is planning to be full go for that. I would expect he would have to make a final decision by mid-June, maybe the 20th, because then 2 weeks from then they'll be gathering in Las Vegas for the showcase, which is basically training camp leading in to Team USA's what they're doing overseas. So I would think give it a couple of weeks, and if you didn't hear something, and I don't expect us to hear anything, I don't expect for anything to change there. He is fully planning on playing with Team USA in the Olympics.
Scott, did the Indiana Fever have a chemistry problem?
I think that's fair, and in large part, Jake, because of lack of time together beyond on the court time. That's the reasoning Christy Sides has said a couple of times that she's left players out on the floor late in games, is because she wants to establish that chemistry and such. While I disagree, you don't need to play the back-to-back number one picks when down 30 in the fourth quarter. Yet at the same time, they haven't had that time to assimilate together, to be on the same page. And I think you can see proof of that when Caitlin is making those long passes, and a lot of times they haven't been prepared for them, or they're not expecting those and such. I think you see the difference of her coming straight into a season, going right into the W season, whereas these players still trying to learn about her patterns and the way in which she plays.
Scott, my bigger issue, Scott Agness is our guest, covers the Pacers as well as the Fever and a large number of basketball elements throughout his great work on Fieldhouse Files, and follow him on Twitter at Scott Agness throughout the course of both the Fever season and the Pacers season. As we mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation, Olympic basketball, I'm sure he'll have insights and observations there as well coming up in July. My bigger issue with the Caitlin Clark saga, the very early goings of it, is I don't mind that on the court, opponents view her as a marked woman, as there's going to be a target on her back, as the physicality is going to be there, as she might be bullied a time or two. And she knows that. And she's referenced that it's been that way throughout her entire career, dating back to her younger college days of needing to find her place and get stronger, faster, better, and not be punked like she's kind of been at times because of the physicality of the league. But my bigger issue has not been that. I don't have a problem with the on-the-court stuff. It's the off-the-court vitriol, animosity, and just, I don't know, kind of, to borrow a phrase, just over-aggressive vitriol towards her. Should we have expected more of that going in? Is it like Jake mentioned that there's a level of envy of she hasn't really done anything in the W yet, but she has Nike deals and State Farm commercials and has been crowned as the next great thing in the sport before she's done anything? Is it jealousy, or is it just a couple of bad instances and poor decisions publicly where people and opponents are kind of calling her out? Not everybody is. Sabrina Ionescu went to her aid and said she's going to figure it out, but others have been, very critical of her. Where's the balance there? And is that a problem in the W right now?
I think it is a problem across the league right now. I think it's envy because of the attention. It's not that she hasn't earned it. It's not that she hasn't done anything in the league just yet. It's that everybody's covering her. They're on national TV more than anybody. And this was the worst team in the league last year. And so a lot of players, I think, are just kind of jealous of the attention that she continues to receive, whereas it's entirely warranted. You're going to see coverage match that of demand. Demand is shown both through merchandise, both through ticket sales, both through TV ratings as well, that it is a Caitlin Clark show, and that's why viewers are in there. So I think it is a huge misstep by these opposing players, because they got to realize a lot of the benefits they were receiving in their large part because of what Caitlin is providing to the league. And so there is that jealousy factor. And I don't like the fact, for example, a couple days ago, you have Kennedy Carter not only make the cheap shot, but then afterwards refuse to own up to it. If you're going to do it, at least speak on it and say, hey, I wanted to make her feel me. She's got a lot to prove in this league, or something like that, where instead it's kind of cowardly not to say anything, and then to, I think, the next day post something on Threads, all she does is shoot threes. I don't get the point about that. And if that's the truth, then she doesn't understand Caitlin's game or her appeal to this league, which is a big misstep on her part.
There's a fine line between welcome to the league, Rook, and the way that was taken. That was the part that I had a bigger issue with, Scott. Yeah.
Yep.
But I think, to me, Scott, the bigger question is this. And that is, and again, I'm saying this from an angle of almost in defense of Caitlin Clark, okay? But where is the rest of the franchise?
Agreed, yeah.
Where two things here where I think there have been missteps. Number one is I don't think Caitlin Clark's teammates dislike her. I don't know that, and it's not my place to say that. I'm not in that locker room. It would be disingenuous for me to pretend that I am. However, this is an opportunity for them to show a solidarity and perception. I'm not saying reality, but perception becomes reality. Perception is that in a weird way, some of her teammates are okay with it. That's perception. I'm not saying it's real, but that's perception. And I'm not the only one that has that perception or that wonders about it. The other is, I think that the Fever can really rally their fan base around this if Caitlin Clark is more, at this point, like absorbed within the community as a part of the community. Tamika Catchings, from day one when she got here, was like literally Indianapolis's best friend and neighbor. Like, everyone felt like Tamika Catchings was the girl that lived next door to them. They all felt like they knew her personally. She was out there. She was making appearances. She owned a tea store. That didn't happen overnight. I get that. But Caitlin Clark is a huge national brand, and I love it. I'm here for it. But it still feels like she's a national brand that Indianapolis happens to be borrowing. And it's time for the franchise to let people know that Caitlin Clark is no longer just an Iowa Hawkeye. She's an Indiana Fever. She lives in Indianapolis. She works in Indianapolis. She's part of Indianapolis. She's part of this community. And I know that it's been very accelerated because it went right into it. But it just feels to me like the people here have not had necessarily the exposure on an intimate level locally to then be able to stand up and say, you're not going to do that to one of ours, because it still feels like she's on loan.
Well, for the second part, I think that's an entirely due to their schedule. There's no doubt she wanted to be at the Indy 500, part of Gamebridge, part of her sponsorship. She also wanted to be at the concert this past weekend with Noah, where he had a jersey, wearing her customized jersey out there. She would have gone to all that if the schedule did not dictate otherwise. So her being out of the community, in my opinion, is not at all a detriment of her. In fact, she's been speaking to the media, which is a conduit, obviously, of the fans upwards of 3 times per game night, and which is at least 10 to 12 minutes each time. So that's 45 minutes that she's spending with the media and therefore the fans, I think. So I think you will see that in due time, Jake. Now, in terms of the first part, I entirely agree. I would like to see, first of all, that starts, I think, with the coach. I would love to see Christy not just tweet out in backing her player, and that the officials have to not allow those non-basketball plays in real time. But remember, Caitlin can only get 7 technicals before she's suspended. Christy does not have that limit. So I would like to see more backing there, but also more so, too, from her teammates. It's one thing to separate her from, Victoria Vivians, who is exchanging words with Caitlin, but it's another thing to say, hey, that's just like a lineman with their quarterback. You're getting involved and making sure you're making that statement. It all goes back to what we covered, Jake, over the last couple of years, I think, from this Pacers team here, in the fact of you had an enforcer in James Johnson. I don't care who it is on this Fever roster. Someone up there needs to stand out and separate themselves and say, nope, we don't tolerate this whatsoever, and I don't care if it costs me a suspension, because you have to realize Caitlin is the franchise, and they haven't acted like it.
Scott Agness is our guest. You can follow him on Twitter at Scott Agness. Scott, the Caitlin Clark situation of the way she's being treated, the way she's being officiated, the need for a foul that's clearly not a basketball play to then be retroactively upgraded to a flagrant one after the fact is more too little too late than it is things should be happening in real time and acknowledged for what it is in the moment. I'm not asking for special treatment for Caitlin Clark. I don't think that the Fever are necessarily asking for special treatment for Caitlin Clark, but we've seen it on the men's side where every now and again a player that could transcend the game, the way that the games are officiated changes. Is it too early in the process of her, 9-game, 10-game in career to say that maybe the way the game is officiated could change or should change due to her play style? Or are we still too early within her career to be saying that?
No, I think you're dead on in terms of officiating needs to change in terms of eliminating the non-basketball plays. The physicality, I see, the one thing that's frustrated me is you've seen some hard fouls just at the basket that they're trying to make you feel her. Yet at the same time, it's those plays out in mid-court with Victoria Vivians like 3 games ago, with Kennedy Carter a couple games ago. Those are the things where I think the officials really need to step in and make sure they don't happen anymore. On top of that, it does feel like even they're being more physical with her in terms of basketball plays. And I think you can legislate that a little bit. She's already getting to the line some, but I think she's deserving even more so. But I think you're seeing less of that because they want to make sure this rookie, kind of earns it and all those sorts of things.
Here's my thought, and I'm going to address the elephant in the room.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of, not necessarily total dive into this, but insinuation about it, that the Caitlin Clark situation and the element that she has been, the way she's been treated is based on race, because it is, she is a Caucasian in a league with a lot of African Americans and et cetera. And maybe the perception of that, maybe that's the case. Maybe the reaction is racially based. But to me, in terms of the players doing it, Kennedy Carter, I'll use as an example. I don't think it has anything to do with Caitlin Clark's race. Diana Taurasi is a very vociferous player when she was, especially early in her career. I mean, she was a cocky player. Sue Bird, Rebecca Lobo. There have been great white players in the WNBA that did not necessarily see the immediate backlash from other players when they were on the floor. That I think it's because of Caitlin Clark's the attention that players feel she has not yet earned, and in the earning potential that is not potential but earning reality for her right now that other players resent. Now, the way that we are reacting to it and absorbing it, yes, race may be a factor there from some media outlets. I'm not going to be naive to say that that's the case, but I don't think the on-court stuff against her is racially motivated. I don't.
Yeah, and that's one situation, Jake, too, where I'd love Kennedy Carter to explain herself. Like, if she was just trying to say, hey, rookie, welcome to the league, say that. Or, try to, there's no good way to explain that cheap shot, to be clear. But at the same time, you wouldn't have mind her try to go off and say something rather than saying, I ain't answering no Caitlin Clark questions. That tells me right there, all right, there's some jealousy, there's some factor going in, because you two haven't had any battles. You guys haven't had any issues that have been leading up to this moment. And so it's difficult to try to explain that. I think it's hard to say whether, without being in the locker room, and to be clear, WNBA does not allow media reporters in the locker room. That changed several years ago, and it's a disappointment because that's where a lot of us media would talk to secondary players. Instead, we get 1, 2, sometimes 3 players at a podium, and those are the only voices that you talk to unless by request. And so I think that's another small angle here is you're hearing less voices because of it, because of those locker rooms change. And that's a WNBA issue, I think. But in terms of whether it's racially motivated or anything like that, it's just hard to say. That's something I would love to have that conversation with people internally and from other teams, because I would agree with you, Jake. A lot of it, more than anything, feels like she's the star. She's getting all this attention. What about us?
By the way, Eddie, and Scott can join in on this. Speaking of Iowa products, Dallas Clark, the newest member of the Colts Ring of Honor. That will take place this season. The Colts just announcing that Dallas Clark, the tight end, will be in the Colts Ring of Honor. Scott, I'm guessing that at North Central High School you probably walked around in a 44 jersey at some point.
I never did have a 44 jersey, no, but I was a big admirer, especially with how many passes he caught. Never wore gloves. I never understood that, but he was tougher for it.
Great player. Pretty good dude, too. He's been we had him on a couple of times on the morning show, and really nice guy. Saw him at Iowa for the Iowa IndyCar race last year. He was there along with Caitlin Clark, actually, I think part of a Hy-Vee promotion, but good dude, so congratulations to him.
Oftentimes you get players lost within great teams. Like once you start listing off Manning, Wayne, Harrison, 4th, 5th, and 6th guys sometimes get lost.
Right.
That was never the case with Dallas Clark.
What's interesting, though, is, and this is and Scott, you can weigh in on this maybe for a different day, but I think Clark was fabulous. I also wonder sometimes how much I don't think this is the case, but I could see people saying that he was the product of a Peyton Manning offense that had a ton of weapons, and you had, and that kept people at bay. Pretty good at yard after catch, though.
Yeah.
Scott, your thoughts?
I think that's probably true for everyone, and that's no knock. It's just Peyton made everybody better. He made his coaches better. I think that's a direct reflection of Peyton and not the teammates.
Yeah, I mean, it's the tale as old as time of chicken and the egg type thing, right? You look anywhere around football, any sport, but especially football, if you have a great quarterback, how good are the weapons around him if the quarterback is known to be an all-time great? You saw it with players that Manning had. You saw it with Brady. You see it now with Burrow and Mahomes and Allen. Like, it happens, but you can't control what situation you end up in. As long as you're catching that football and getting nice yards after catch, the stats are going to come a long way.
Okay, Dallas Clark, Bob Sanders, Caitlin Clark. Which one's the most popular Hawkeye in Indianapolis?
Gotta say
I don't know
Caitlin.
how you could go against Caitlin Clark based on what I continue to see, Jake.
I got bad news for you guys. Right now, the most popular, Bob Sanders. Bob Sanders, in my opinion, and people can tell me if I'm wrong, Bob Sanders, in my opinion, is the most popular Indianapolis Colt not named Edge, Marvin, or Peyton.
Okay, maybe this isn't fair, but I just because you do this sometimes with the Wizard of Oz game of what do you have to show a picture of or play a note to somebody randomly on the street, what are the chances they get it? I think if you just put both in uniform, not helmet, just straight up with uniform, I think Clark gets more recognition.
I didn't say recognition. I said more popular.
I stand by what I said. Let's stick with Clark.
Bob Sanders is the fourth most popular player in Indianapolis Colts history. I'm not saying that that's for me. For me, I love Dickerson.
Also, in this discussion, I'm not knocking Bob Sanders.
No. I know you're not, but I'm telling you. Like Bob Sanders, if you ask people on the street, I will bet you right now, if you took a survey right now of 1,000 people at an Indianapolis Colts game and said, who are your all-time favorite Indianapolis Colts? Bob Sanders would get the fourth highest number of votes behind Peyton, Reggie, and Marvin. Peyton, Reggie, and Edgerrin. He would get above Marvin Harrison.
I wouldn't necessarily fight you on that. And in regards to that list, by the way, I would go Clark. I would go. I would go Caitlin, and then I would go Sanders. Then I would go Dallas.
Caitlin Clark in time, but right now in this town, Bob Sanders is more popular than Caitlin Clark.
I'm clarifying the ranking system that I have there.
Scott, anything you want to add before we let you go?
I would throw Marvin clearly ahead of Bob, I think. And I'd throw Freeney and Mathis before Bob Sanders.
In greatness as players, no question. In overall fan popularity, Bob Sanders was. I'm telling you, when they had the float, when they had the parade, I'm telling you right now.
We have a lot of time during the summer. We could do this survey. We could do it.
Listen, I agree with you guys that Bob Sanders, to me, I think Booger McFarland was the difference maker in that Super Bowl run. But I'm telling you, when that float came down Meridian Street on their way to, I guess it would have been the RCA Dome then, before it was Lucas Oil Stadium. I'm telling you right now, Bob Sanders was standing on the back of that float, bobbing his head up and down, and that guy was literally a rock star. He was like, I'm telling you.
Eddie, I know we don't do this very often, and Jake can phrase it however he wants because I don't want to influence it in any way. We can put a querying company poll up, however Jake wants that's phrased, and let's see what happens. I'm not doubting you. I want to see the science of it. I want to see even though me and Scott are going to go and,
I forgot, McAfee's way up there now, obviously, too. But I'm telling you, Bob Sanders is massive.
From that group. You put it in that group, it removes McAfee, right? If you're talking about the Super Bowl run and all that, you need to influence it that way of that era. You can't include.
I'm telling you, between of that group, Bob Sanders is massively. He's like a mythical figure in this town. Bob Sanders is. People love Bob Sanders. Zach
I don't doubt that.
Zach Kiefer sleeps in Bob Sanders pajamas. I don't know if you know that.
I think a lot of people love Bob Sanders. I'm not doubting that part of it. I just, with the question, even though it's probably ignorant, I would go Caitlin Clark.
Okay.
And Jake, I think the biggest thing is longevity. He was so good for what felt like 3 years, whereas you had even a guy like Freeney and Mathis for 10, 12, right?
But I'm telling you, that adds – here's the thing.
When it's in a Super Bowl run especially.
He was a defensive player of the year that left you wanting more. That's the thing about him. Mathis and Freeney, we saw it through to basically to the end, even though obviously I know that Freeney went on and played elsewhere. But I'm just telling you.
You get the language down. Let's put it on the poll. I want the company to answer.
I'll simply say this. As somebody who covered those teams and has been doing sports talk radio and Indy since, I am always not stunned, but the guy that more people ask me about than any other is Bob Sanders, undoubtedly. Anyway, Scott, appreciate it. We'll talk soon, all right?
You bet. Thanks, guys.
I'm telling you, we get it on the querying company poll because I want to see it now. And I'm willing to eat the L because you have covered the market longer than Eddie and I put together, but I would like to see it. The poll is out.
Yep.
Did you frame it how he wanted it? Because I don't want us to be accused of misleading or leading witnesses. Did you frame it how he wanted it?
Who is your favorite Colts player on this list?
And who do you have? What did you put, though?
Bob Sanders.
Okay.
Dallas Clark.
Right.
Dwight Freeney. Marvin Harrison.
Okay.
Is that agreeable to you?
Yeah, although the original question was who's more popular between Bob Sanders, Caitlin Clark, and
Dallas Clark.
Dallas Clark.
But then you went on to say it was
but I'm saying
there'd be more fans of Bob. That's why I phrased it that way.
I'm telling you, you're going to be surprised.
At query_company, by the way.
And to be clear, and I want to preface this on my end because I don't want my Twitter account being full of Colts mentions here. They're all great legendary players. Like, just because I have a viewpoint on Clark Caitlin's popularity here, or I would agree with Scott, I think Marvin Harrison would probably get more love in that regard than Sanders does, doesn't mean I disagree with you that Sanders gets love and he is a beloved player. That was a beloved team that ends up winning a Super Bowl. But I'm very fascinated to see how it plays out. I am. And if I'm wrong, then we'll put it in the Jake tally and just put another feather in your cap, my friend.
My buddy Spencer Field. How often do you actually get texts with Colts opinions? On a game day? 125 a day? Honestly? Like at one point I went in because my phone, I had like the store, I had to like free up storage or whatever, and I hadn't cleaned text in a long time, and it was like, you can wipe out your text and save, remove like 8% of your phone storage. I'm like, oh, I guess that'll work.
Early returns so far, 22 votes in. Bob Sanders, Marvin Harrison Jr. tied. 40.9%.
Marvin Harrison Sr.
Sorry, that's what I meant. I don't know why I said junior.
It's okay. It's the news cycle. Let it pass.
I'm telling you, he was a rock star here, a rock star.
I think next to March Madness, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, I think is the anthem that gets me most excited.
How about the old NBA on NBC, which may be back?
It is great, and I can't wait for Round Ball Rock to be back. But there's something about the fact of that tune, and every 4 years,
No question.
I love it.
Speaking of that, some of those that are going to be participating in the Olympics this year, it is in Paris. Is that correct?
Yes.
That is correct.
Oui.
Those that are going to be going to Paris begin, of course, naturally in Indianapolis. We have tickets to give away for the USA Swimming Olympic Trials.
By the way, shout out to Indianapolis International. The turnover that these people make, Jake, from a week ago, Indy 500 get up to now, and I'll show the YouTube audience the airport walkway, like once you exit the terminals, it's all a replica of the swimming lanes. Like from wherever terminal you're coming out of, it's all swimming lanes. The get up is ready for USA swimming trials. They're all in. They're locked in. Indy International always has cool get up. So does all of Visit Indy, but especially Indy International whenever we're hosting big sporting events. And like you mentioned, tickets to give away here.
Okay, and those tickets, by the way, I'm pulling up the information now. This is for evening sessions. Is that correct, Eddie?
Yes, it's for one of the finals evening sessions on the opening weekend, that being the 15th or 16th of this month.
15th and 16th. And again, this will be an electronic transfer of the tickets, by the way. But this is for an evening session, 15th. What's that?
4 tickets.
4 tickets.
It's a 4-pack, family 4-pack.
That'd be awesome to be able to watch the finals of who is going to get themselves eligible for the Olympic Games. How are we doing this, Eddie, for our tickets?
Let's just make it easy. It's the first week. We're giving these away next week as well. So first time today, color whatever number.
Which number shall we go with? We have 4 to give away, so let's go caller number 4, right?
Bingo. Works
Okay.
for me.
Now, Jimmy, speaking of giveaways, you're giving away goods, right?
Yes, I do have gifts to give away. Eddie, are you going to answer a phone right now, or do I have time to?
Yeah,
bring
I'm going
you
to
in?
answer a phone now.
Okay, so do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay, so
Eddie can do 2 things
I
at
did
once.
bring back some gifts. It's not quite the array that Jake had, but
This was from, again, you had jury duty. You got out early. They said, you know what, you were sequestered at the Howard Johnson for the Vanderburgh County bank trial.
yes,
And because of publicity and protection. And so then to get away, you went on a few-day vacation, right?
I did. So we went on a cruise for a little bit, and then we went to Disney World. I grabbed you guys both stuff from Disney. For Jake, as you posted, and I think you've commented on it, so I'm not revealing anything too publicly here, but in your latest Squeeze the Juice Out of Life message, you mentioned that you were taking up golf lessons.
Correct.
And you had completed your first round of 18.
Correct.
And so in honor of that, we have for you, Jake Query,
Oh, look at
a
that.
sleeve of Mickey Mouse golf balls.
Hell yeah. That's nice. That's cool. You gotta you gotta stare and hit Mickey?
Yes.
Seems
Or lose Mickey, which,
that does happen as
Does.
well. Now,
Does
you know what? You know what I noticed? And I'm new to golf, so bear with me here with my naivete on this, but so far I've lost like 3 golf balls, but it wasn't from like hitting it like into the water.
Yeah.
As much as hitting it and then
you can't find it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're just like, I
Yep.
have no idea where it went. I swear it's right over
Yes.
here.
I've tried different colors of golf balls. If you get in a patch of rough and you lose it, we've done the thing where you circle back, you drive the cart, you're like,
Yes.
no, it had to be over there, and then you just can't find it. Yeah.
And then what do? You just drop, right?
Yeah.
You're like, it
Well, it
feels,
depends who you're playing with. If you're playing with a group of friends and it's a friendly thing, you just drop somewhere.
These are nice.
So there you go. Little.
Oh, it's Mickey in 3 different poses. I almost feel bad playing with these.
Hey, you can keep them. Just put them up on the
So
the
wait, what'd
thing.
you
That's
get,
fine, too. You got a Mickey Mouse sleeve of golf balls in honor of him.
Nice. Nice.
Completing his first round of 18 and continuing in his golfing journey. For you, Eddie, I almost went with a hat, but one size fits most wouldn't have applied, and they were out of size 10s in
very
the new era.
funny.
So instead, just so that you have for the next time you're out and about at an airport and you're walking along, and maybe you see a celebrity or two. Maybe it's this time Ellie De La Cruz that's just chilling at gate A9. Eddie, a Mickey Mouse baseball for you. I just threw it. You weren't ready. Oh wow! What are the odds of that? It landed in the mic, the mic arm.
Wow.
There you go. And
Wow,
as
that's cool.
as you could tell by the bounce of your head, it's not a full.
You couldn't do that
baseball.
100 times if you
No,
tried.
no shot.
No.
Off Eddie's dome into the
So,
mic.
Eddie, over
port.
here. Let me check
That's
it out.
incredible. So a
this is
Disney,
cool.
little Disney Mickey Mouse baseball.
In case
for-
he just happens to
Eddie
run
Garrison.
into Bob Sanders at the airport and is like, "Hey, I need an autographed
Now
baseball."
he's gonna have to sign Mickey's face because the baseball itself is black, so that your
This is
standard
pretty cool.
Sharpie won't
Unless
work.
I get
but-
a
silver.
silver.
Yeah, you go silver Sharpie, then you could. So yeah, there you go. Our vacation gift buying continues.
Now-
You see how
Gentlemen.
that was done, Jimmy? He waited for me to
Well,
look.
you made eye contact and you looked down. I apologize. It's on me. But we got the 1 in a million shot there off the dome of Eddie Garrison.
1 in a million,
which,
Doc.
Had his head not been so big, it probably wouldn't have bounced directly into the microphone.
very
1 in a
funny.
million for the ass
Very
man.
funny.
1 in a
There you
million
go.
shot.
There you go.
Okay, so when we come back, Jimmy, you have a list when you were in. I'm a little bothered that you weren't paying more attention, as you should have been, to the actual trial. But apparently I don't know if you're not supposed to have a phone in the trial, but you made notes of things that you missed while gone in terms of sports stories that you were chomping at the bit to opine that you missed. So we're going to do was Jimmy paying attention to the world of sports while on jury duty segment, right?
Yes, we'll do that
And we're
next.
going to find out whether or not you were paying attention, and if so, what it is you want to get off your chest.
I can't wait.
All right, we'll do it next.
Hey, JMV, here's something that we absolutely
All right, Jimmy, what'd you miss? What were you chomping at the bit?
So it's a top 5, like a
Okay.
sentence each on these motifs of things I missed while I
Okay,
was
we'll
gone.
begin with number 5 to 1.
But we have 2 outside looking in candidates. One we already talked about. I wasn't sure how much Caitlin Clark we would get into today. We got into everything that I wanted to talk about it, which is the league needs to figure out what they're doing there, whether it's from an officiating standpoint, whether it's just the vitriol that's there. That needs to work itself out at some point. We talked about that extensively. The last one, and this is just for Eddie's ire, Yankees had the best record in baseball. Okay, everything else is local. This is top 5. Do you want to give me a number and I'll read, or do you want me to just run the show?
5 to 1.
Number 5.
To the guy at the pool bar who wondered aloud, wouldn't it be crazy if there was a crash right out of the gate during the Indianapolis 500? Why are you the way that you are?
Fair enough. Tom Blomquist clearly heard him, right?
Are you doing them all?
I didn't know if you were done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This will be rapid fire. Won't be too long.
Number 4.
Joseph Newgarden, back-to-back Indy 500s. Legendary stuff. Thrilling finish to the 108th running. Always delivers, but my heart breaks for Pato. He will drink the milk and kiss the bricks one day.
Okay, hold on here. Did you say milk?
Milk?
There you go.
Did you want to opine with that? Did I do something wrong?
Listen, I did radio for 10 years and had PTSD with a guy that says milk. So I'm glad you said milk.
Okay.
Not to be confused with the Jersey Milk Candy Bar from Canada. How you doing?
Number 3.
Pacers late game disappointments against Boston, combined with the Halliburton injury, going to leave me all offseason thinking about what could have been.
Okay.
You're right there. You have an opportunity where you can have legitimate conversations. Maybe it's a 2-1 series. Maybe it's tied up 1-1 going to game 3. A lot of different areas of what could have been. Sure, other teams this postseason could say the same thing. The Knicks for certain, but that was a tough one to swallow.
Number 2.
That said, Pacers overachieved like crazy this season. Retain Siakam. Hope Benedict Mathurin takes a leap forward. Get another piece, and you'll be a real title contender next year.
And number 1.
Mike Woodson publicly states that you win with good perimeter play and good guard play. Welcome to the club, Coach. Glad to have you aboard. Can't wait for this season.
Mike woke up from his 15-year slumber, right? And, by the way, Mike Woodson is hosting a big recruit. I would think Indiana's got an in. A top 30 recruit.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about.
Down to 3 schools.
Is it a player? Is it the son of a player that he coached?
Yes. This player is down to Auburn, Ohio State, and the Fightin' Hurrying Hoosiers of Indiana. And his dad has a candy bar named after him. Not really. Carmelo Anthony's son, a top 30 recruit. Indiana on his list. I would think that relationship with Mike Woodson a big part of that, right?
Yes. That would be the main selling point of former NBA ties, using them, him knowing Carmelo, having a working relationship with Carmelo, having coached him. Yeah, that would be cool. That's something to monitor. But tongue-in-cheek aside of Mike Woodson talking about guard play and perimeter play, they addressed all of that on paper in the portal this offseason. Does it translate? Do you finally see a team that's doing all those things? We'll wait and see, but at least a public declaration about what we've been screaming about for years on end now is at least at the forefront of that staff, and I am legitimately very excited for this year, even though we still, granted, have 4 or 5 months to go.
Jake, I know you were able to share your opinions on the Pascal Siakam max extension last week. Jimmy, what are your thoughts?
I think our main point of contention when we were previewing that before I left was how many years you go. At this point, with what he meant to them, especially in that Game 7 against New York, and what he can mean as a cornerstone for this franchise in this first window of the Tyrese Halliburton era, if you have to give him 5 years, that's fine. I'm not going to sweat it. I think 4 would be the nice number, but if it winds up being a 5-year max deal, even though he'll be 35 by the end, and more likely than not, Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong on this. I know in baseball you can front load, and I think you can do it in the NFL too. Is that more of a gray area in the NBA, or can you front load contracts there as well?
I don't think you can. I think when you agreed upon the max, it's certain numbers because it grows each year
based on the
max.
cap. Yeah,
correct.
So I'm okay with it. You can't let him leave, and I'm not even talking about the picks that you gave up to get him. I'm not as worried about that. I've made my
Yeah,
point
the
clear
picks,
on
the picks is like,
Yeah,
who cares,
correct.
right?
Yeah, especially given the fact that most of them were done for this year's draft. It's a step backward without Pascal Siakam, even if you're going to be potentially on the hook for more money than you would like to as he ages. Just because a player gets older doesn't necessarily mean they're going to fade out and not be worth still. They might not be worth the dollar amount they're getting paid, but they could still be worth the experience and the play style for the team moving forward, if that makes sense. The presence is worth more than the monetary stuff you might eat at the back end of that contract. Whatever he wants, I'd give him a 4 or 5 year max deal if that's what it comes down to. I would not sweat or let Pascal Siakam walk away if it's quarreling over an extra year of age 34 or 35 seasons.
I just, the cap's going to go up, and that's going to give them the flexibility. I mean, we talked about it a lot last week, Jimmy. My only thing is I love their young pieces, and I know you're going to have to lose some, and I just hope that you're not sacrificing 5 to 6 years for an immediate 2.
And
I get it, though. I get it's going to happen.
You can go to a point, but you can go over the cap to retain your own. It makes things very complicated with how much flexibility you have moving forward. But if whenever the bill comes due for some of their young pieces, just because they have Siakam and Halliburton on the books, does not mean they would be unable to then retain them. You're going to have to look into luxury tax penalties and stuff like that perhaps the Simons wouldn't be interested in. But just because you pay Siakam now doesn't mean you can't still retain the young pieces. It's just going to cost money and really hurt your flexibility, which is why you have to be right on all these things when you're in a market like the Pacers are. You have to be right on Mathurin. You have to be right about the extension for Siakam, not the final 2 years, but that he is a part of this nucleus and a part of this core moving forward. Your margin for error is so much smaller than other teams. That said, Siakam is the answer to a question for this team going into 24-25 and 25-26 at minimum. If that means that you have to get a little bit more creative financially, that's why you pay Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan the big bucks to worry about those problems 2-3 years from now.
Mike Chappell can weigh in on our debate regarding Bob Sanders. I don't want to lead the witness, but we'll ask him about it next.
The Ride with JMV.
I'm going to ask Mike Chappell this question right off the top. He may disagree with me. He may totally disagree with me.
Now, I just got out of a jury trial, so just like you
That's
mentioned,
right.
don't lead the witness.
I'm not gonna
I'll
lead the
recognize it, okay? I'll recognize it.
Mike Chappell, you've covered the Colts for a long time. If you were to think about the Super Bowl era Colts, the team that won the Super Bowl, obviously went back to a second one, but we'll focus more on the Super Bowl winning team. The most popular player by the fans of Indianapolis on that team that was not named Edgerrin, Peyton, or Reggie was who?
It was Bob. I listened to part of your show, so I wasn't completely coming stupid. Yeah, it was. And who else would it be? I mean, I don't know who else would be. He was. I heard you mention Booger McFarland. Bob Sanders was the driving force behind the Super Bowl. You know how many games he played that year? 4. He played 4 games. But he comes back. And I'm telling you, a guy that's forgotten. Rob Morris got put back in the lineup too. So to a second level, Rob Morris. But Bob Sanders was just he was that aberration to where he played so little, but when he played, he was so impactful. I mean, we've seen the highlights of him playing, and the thing that's always to this day strikes me. We talked to teammates about Bob Sanders, and they said you had to be careful around a huddle. I mean, the stack of players when you're bringing down a ball carrier, because you didn't want to be collateral damage. Because he just sort of went in and cleaned things up. So it's one of these where there's really not a wrong answer, but yeah, Bob Sanders, partly because how much he was that mystery man, and to this day he's a mystery man. He really is hard to get a hold of and in contact. And I ran into him at the Hall of Fame several years ago, and he was as friendly. I still got a picture we took together, but he played in Indy. This is really crazy. He played in Indy for 7 seasons. That's 112 games, okay? He played 50.
Yeah.
He basically missed 4. He basically missed 4 complete seasons.
But Chapp,
go ahead.
When they had that pseudo Super Bowl parade, he was standing on the back of the last float with his arms folded, bobbing his head up and down, wearing sunglasses, and you would have thought that it was literally Prince, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and Michael Jackson wrapped in one. Like, he was the rock star amongst all rock stars of that team in that moment. It was unbelievable.
Well, whenever they played again on national TV, which was a ton, and you know, Madden was the guy. He called him like the eraser. And whenever you're lifted to different levels by the John Maddens and people like that, it just catches fire. And again, I could have argued Bob Sanders ahead of Dallas Clark, and this is not to dismiss Dallas at all. I'm
simply talking about popularity as opposed to just mythical popularity.
I don't know who else it would have been. I didn't hear what the other possibilities
Marvin Harrison
were.
is the clubhouse leader from the poll that we have going on.
Again, Marvin, in the public's eye, I mean, well, it's different. The public perception of Marvin and the media dealings with Marvin were night and day. He was such a offsetting person. I had an okay relationship with him, but even that was at arm's length.
He was just aloof, right? He was enigmatic. It's interesting because
not the word. It was detached. Aloof means he felt himself above everybody.
What's interesting was for as elusive as Sanders was in being on the field, Harrison was the same in terms of being in the public, right? Like he just and I'm with you. I always kind of got along with Marvin. I remember once I was at an event with him, and I said, "Man, how come you never do interviews?" And he said, "Well, I get camera shy. Like, I'm okay one-on-one, but once a bunch of people get around, you know, he kind of walled up a little bit." I just think, to me, Mike, as somebody who covered those teams, I mean, obviously Peyton Manning, it goes without saying. You know, Reggie Wayne now, because he's still around, it goes without saying. And then in the later years, McAfee, because of his post-playing career, it goes without saying. But the player that more people ask me about than anybody else is Bob Sanders.
But part of that, though, is because of how he's not gone Barry Sanders, although darn close as far as.
Well, he did right. I get it.
And I think there's some of that mystery to him. I think there is a lot of that. But at the same time, he was such an impactful player when he played, and so I think that's a lot. That's really kind of crazy. That's a lot of where the popularity comes from. Is you don't really know the guy. And again, what I knew about Bob, I liked. I mean, it's funny. He'd walk through the locker room during media access, and one time I said, "Why are you wearing your shoulder pads?" And he's not. That was him. That was Bob. That's how big he was in the upper body. And I probably think his upper body was too strong for the joints and the ligaments and all that, because he ended up having, what was it shoulder pecs or something that went out on him that really betrayed him. Knee here and there, but
he had a torn pectoral muscle. He had muscles on muscles. That it was amazing.
And that's the problem. I thought he was one of those guys that was too strong for his body. I really did.
For sure. He was 5'8", 205, right?
Right.
I do think. I mean, Mike, let's address the elephant in the room. I mean, there was always kind of the speculation as to whether or not that was all entirely organic, right? I'll say it that way, in terms of his muscles.
And there was never any evidence that there was. There was never, I don't think, any even remote rumblings around the NFL.
Except for that the injuries he had were consistent with that.
Well, I understand. You're right. But I could say the same thing about, well, I shouldn't, because Steve Ettman had problems. And I do think Steve Ettman had some outside help of his body to really impact his career. But Bob Sanders, I tell you, on the field, defensive player of the year. I mean, holy smokes! And there's so many trivia things about Bob Sanders. When was he drafted? Was it I get my years mixed up. 04. In 04, he was a second round pick in 04. And he was the last draft pick to sign that year. That's back when you were really negotiating. Well, they drafted him out of Iowa when he had a broken bone in his foot, I believe. They knew he wasn't going to be ready for the start of the season, so it didn't matter. But he was just such he's one of those guys that, again, he erased mistakes. Your defense was 5 notches better with him on the field. Normally that's a defensive end, a pass rusher who has that kind of an impact. The Troy Polamalos are the exceptions, and people like Ed Reed. And again, Bob Sanders wasn't Ed Reed. He was probably more Polamalu than he was Ed Reed. But my goodness, what a fantastic player! And he will be in the ring soon, and deservedly so. I still say it was Bob Sanders. He was the reason, the driving force. As much as Peyton and the offense won the AFC title game when they were behind, was it 21-6, and they had the great second half. Throughout the playoffs, it was the defense. The defense rose up, shut down, was it Larry Johnson? It shut down Baltimore to where Vinny has 5 field goals, and they out-toughed the Bears in the Super Bowl. So it was Bob. It was all those defensive players, and kudos to them. And that'll be a part of Colts history. I hope no one ever forgets is, yes, Peyton and that offense and this, that, and the other, Freddie Mathis, they were such a part, Freddie Mathis in that defense. Booger McFarland, like you mentioned, I thought the defense was the reason they lifted the Lombardi in the rain. I really do, and that's not to dismiss Peyton and those guys. That was a defense and run game playoff run that year.
Chapp, your reaction to Dallas Clark being the latest to find out that he will go into the Ring of Honor for the Colts?
I'm fine. I mean, and again, that's not to dismiss it. I think there's really no wrong. Yes, there are wrong answers. You could really muck it up, but they didn't. And Dallas or Bob Sanders, Dallas had the better, longer career. And again, I remember talking to Bill Polian, and he called Dallas the missing piece. This is an offense with Peyton and Marvin and Reggie and Edgerrin, and he thought that tight end who could do then what guys are doing now, getting down the field and yards after the catch. He thought that was what really took him over the top. I remember his 100 catch season, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, and really truly, I won't say before his time because there were guys before him, the Gateses and Gonzalez and all that, but he was what I remember when one of the losses to the Patriots in New England, he thought that how Marcus Pollard could have been much more effective if the Patriots hadn't held and, jammed and all that stuff. And Clark really took them over the top. He took a great offense and made it whatever is greater. So kudos to him. Dallas was in town. Was it last year? Because he's doing triathlons now. Or he was.
That's right.
He was in town to hype up a deal for donations. And,
that's right. We had him on the morning show. As a matter of fact, it was right after he was at the IndyCar race in Iowa, and then he came here and did a marathon one of those. Right.
Just a great guy. And I ran into him a few times, and I talked to him. I think I talked to him when he was here in town for that. But I ran into him when the Colts were in London, and he was over there doing some stuff, I think, for NFL Network. And just a tremendous ambassador for the Colts. So a very, deserving decision by the Colts, by Jim Irsay. Let's be honest. So good for Dallas.
The Dean Mike Chappell of Fox United CBS 4. Mike, this is more tongue-in-cheek than anything because I do have a question about the Colts tight end room, and I'm sorry to be morbid about it, but it's just the kind of humor that I'm involved myself in. Do you think you will still be on the beat by the time Andrew Luck's name goes up there?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm looking at another year or two just because the hips are failing me and all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know what the cooling off period needs to be. I don't know. Boy, when Luck was in town, what was it, a couple months ago? He was Andrew Luck. He was exactly like I remember him, minus 30 pounds. Because he's very much a dad and is he still a grad student or whatever, going for his master's or whatever. But such a pleasant guy. No, I don't know.
Are we still really, like 5 years?
I hate to say this, Mike, but and I don't want this to come off the wrong way. I don't know how else to say this, but I want you to tell me if you agree, Mike. If Andrew Luck is going to get into the Ring of Honor, it has to be in the lifetime of Jim Irsay, because Irsay is the guy that would put him there, and I don't know elsewhere that they would. Well, but when Jim passes the baton to his daughters, it's still Irsay driven. I understand, but do you think that they have the same effect? And I'm not saying they dislike Andrew Luck. Don't get me wrong. I think Jim Irsay has a very high appreciation and love for Andrew Luck that is a deeper connection than other people had with him. Maybe when we were in his office, he always had us before this last stretch. He'd have us in his office during draft time, and it's like 60 freaking degrees in his office. But there were like 15 of us in there, the guys who regularly cover the Colts, and he's got here's Ringo's drum set, here's these guitars and all this stuff. But his big bookcase in back of his desk, it's massive. So he does some great stuff as you had anticipated. But he's got 3 helmets. He's got 3 helmets there, and it's Peyton, John Unitas, and Andrew Luck. So yeah, you're right. There's no question where Jim places him. I think does it come into discussion? We can't put him in yet because there'll still be a small, loud majority that boos him, because they haven't gotten over Andrew Luck being selfish and putting himself above the fan base. I don't know. He's going to get in. He'll get in whether it's Jim or Caitlin or Carly or somebody. He'll get in. He deserves to be in. When we talk about when I think about Colts and the what if, the injuries and all this, what would they have been? Andrew Luck would be like in his 12th year, and he'd be like 34. And I'm telling you, to this day, if Andrew Luck hadn't dealt with the injuries and turned away, this team would have had another Lombardi. I swear to goodness, I'm convinced they would have with him.
They were close, not as close as getting to the AFC Championship game appeared in 2014. But when he walked away in 19, Chris Ballard had that team ready to go. Everything was solid. All it needed was that quarterback. And I to this day, I believe. I'm not going to Jim Irsay multiple Lombardis, but I'm convinced had Andrew Luck been able to sustain his career, and it was getting better. He was coming off comeback player of the year, for crying out loud. So I'm convinced they would have won a Super Bowl with Andrew Luck. But it didn't have, the what ifs. But when you talk about what if careers, it's Andrew Luck in my mind. It's Andrew Luck, and then it's Bob Sanders. What if they stay healthy? Totally different things, because Bob Sanders was just, he didn't treat his body well. I'm talking on the field. I'm not talking off the field. But what would they have done if? And those two really, to a lesser degree, Steve Entman. That's back in the day before a lot of people. He was pretty good. But those two guys, what might they have done had they stayed healthy? And I never got the impression that Andrew Luck was a lifer. He wasn't going to play 16, 17 years. I just, he enjoyed it. He really did. He was absolutely elite at it. But I always thought there was something else that was going to complete him. And it turns out to be family, what he's got. But, so that's a rabbit hole we're going down. But those are the two guys I always wonder what would have happened if. But I do think Andrew Luck gets in probably after I'm done. I don't know what the cooling off period would be. I mean, it's been, since 19, whatever that is, 5 or 6 years, 4 or 5 years. I would hope people have gotten, I don't know, it's always bad when you say get over it. Well, get past it.
Well, you could say that speeds up if that speeds up if Richardson has a great year this year. I think you need something to take your mind off of that last sting at that position. I mean, for some people, not for everybody. I'm with you, Chapp. It's 5 years. Get over it. But, I think if you have something to hang your hat on, especially at that position, maybe the wound is less painful.
Yeah, and again, I guess the argument against, if you want to, I remember back in college debate, they gave you a for and against whether you believed it or not. You could say, well, they never got to the Super Bowl with him, and it was a shorter than you like career. So was Bob Sanders, but he's got a world title. But I just think the impact that Andrew Luck had was immense, and I hate the fact that I think there's still a portion of the fan base that holds the abrupt ending against him. When how can you? I mean, really, it's the people that are PO'd are upset because Andrew Luck took something from them, which is unfortunate. When a guy, and again, let's keep in mind, Andrew Luck was in position to walk away. He had made buku bucks, so but at the same time, knowing Andrew Luck, he would have walked away regardless because he was, you had to be there during the press conference. You just had to be there. And that he was a beaten puppy. He just was. There wasn't much left of him. And I remember reading, was it Sports Illustrated, ESPN, the story that was done, how he kind of laid himself bare about how much mentally it was impacting him, and it was impacting his marriage. And like I said, it wasn't football first with Andrew Luck. It was family first, and football was second. Maybe a close second sometimes, but. That's why, I hope it's sooner rather than later. I really do. But next year, I don't know. I might put Bob in next year. I've been, here we go again, another rabbit hole. I've been urging them to find a legitimate pre-Manning Colt to put in, because there was football before Peyton Manning. Now, it wasn't great football, but there were some really, really good players on bad teams. I don't agree with all the people that are up in the Ring of Honor now. There's one or two that I'd say, I don't think so. But, I would like to see someone from pre-Peyton put in, and we could argue whether it's Eugene Daniel, whether it's Jeff Herrod, people
Ray
like
Donaldson.
That. Yeah, that's good. That's a tough one for a lot of reasons. He's the one that deserves it. Ray Donaldson deserves it, without question. I remember doing a all-time Indy Colt team when I was still at the Star, and I talked to assistant coaches. It wasn't my opinion; it was assistant coaches, and I talked to an assistant coach about the offensive line, and I said, "Okay," I said, "Center, Ray Donaldson or Jeff Saturday?" He said, "Ray Donaldson." He said, "Far and away." He said, "Ray Donaldson was an elite player."
Is Dwayne Bickett in?
No, he won't get in. No, he won't get in. I don't see much of a push for him. You know, the John Hands, the contract or the career wasn't really good enough. But you know, the Jeff Herod, you know, a lot of these guys did, but Jeff Herod gave his body to the franchise. He did.
Come on, Chapp. Give me some Albert Bentley love.
He was good.
He was.
He was good. He was good until they replaced Bentley with a Mercedes with Eric.
That was the greatest line ever was when Dickerson was skulking. Didn't somebody say, park the Rolls and bring out the Bentley?
Yeah, and if you remember, Albert's last game as a starter was against the Jets, and he ran for like 120. That was the game after they traded for Dickerson. Ben was pretty good. Albert was pretty good.
I think Ricky Turner should be in the Ring of Honor.
Just for being that guy to run the wishbone. Yeah.
For being a 3-game wishbone wonder and winning in San Diego, if I'm not mistaken. Why not? Let's go.
They could have put Gary Hogeman in there for setting the franchise record for touchdown passes against the counterfeit Bills.
Peel off the scab and let's go. Let's win the division, right? Hey, Chapp.
So many stories.
In terms of the installment this year, anything jump out at you coming off OTAs? And, you know, obviously Richardson's the big story, but what jumped out, if anything?
Seeing Latu, I'll message him up at some point. We were out there the other day, and they're done, and we're having our interviews at the one end by the stadium, by the facility, and he's at the far end working by himself, doing pass rush moves against the goalpost. So I tell you, when your so-called best players are your hardest workers, I go back to Peyton and Tarek and Edgerrin and all these, Reggie and Marvin and Dwight and Robert. That's when you know you got something special, and they've got that with some guys here with Quentin's and Ryan Kelly's and all those guys in Richardson. So that really struck me. I'm still watching what they do at safety. I don't like what they've got at safety. I just don't. You know, Nick Cross and Julian Blackman, yes, I'm fine. He's a good player. He's a really good player. The rest of them, they just don't know. I still hope they sign a veteran safety. You can get one relatively cheap now who's played at a high level, whether it's Justin Simmons, whether it's whomever, Quandre Diggs, whomever. There's a guy out there. That's the position that I'm most concerned with. What was most optimistic for me, I thought, was Michael Pittman was out there. Now, he wasn't practicing, but he was out there. And what we saw the previous week with him getting blown up on a collision with a bunch of DBs, it looked like it might be something. So they avoided that. And I've seen 2 or 3 players across the league of a torn ACL, a torn Achilles, and man, you don't want that kind of stuff during your OTAs. But so no, I like where they are, and one thing people need to understand is this is mandatory minicamp for 3 days, and then they're done till the end of July. But this isn't dramatically different from what they've been doing. The last 2 weeks, they've been doing 11-on-11, 7-on-7, and you know, occasionally, like last week, I think Cater was missing a day or two, and Dio was missing a day or two, but you know now they'll all be there. But by and large, this team's been intact during the off season, and this is just the last 3 days of being together. It's not like this is training camp to where there's a different level. This is what they've been doing. This is like the culmination of it. But you know, it's just good to see these guys. It's really good to see Richardson out there throwing it. And it's really been good when we've seen Taylor out there with him because they need the work together. So, you know, I'm encouraged by what I've seen. And it's just going to be a long, whatever that is, 5 or 6 weeks layoff between now and between the end of this week and training camp. And you really hope during that downtime there's no news, because any news coming out in late June or early July generally is not a good thing.
The Dean Mike Chappell of Fox 9 and CBS 4 is our guest. Chapp, we mentioned Dallas Clark getting in the Ring of Honor after his career ends. You have about 2 years, and then Jack Doyle is the next face of that position for the franchise. This has been my question all offseason, really the last 2 off seasons, has been my biggest question on the offensive side of the ball, non-quarterback division. When do they find that next crown jewel tight end piece for this roster? When you look at the depth chart, and I know it's early and it's something that we'll monitor through mandatory minicamp, through everything at Grand Park at the end of July, who has the best chance at that? Jelani Woods, Kylan Granson, Will Mallory, Molly Cox? Who has the best chance to carve out that role? And how much of it, Chapp, goes on the chemistry or the best chemistry between those potential names and Anthony Richardson?
Well, and everything you said, that's one reason there was so much buzz around Brock Bowers in the draft.
Right.
Is boy, what if? And, you got there at 13. Would they have taken him over Latu? I don't think so. When you can get the best defensive player. If I had to guess, Jelani Woods, he's got everything you want. He's got the size. He's like 6'7", 260. But they're all different. Who is Molly Cox going to stick and be the main blocker and give you 30 catches? Cutting Granson. I sort of see Will Mallory sort of being that, the same type of player. And if they keep 4, somebody's going to go. Somebody's got to go. Drew Ogletree, who is coming back from the off-season issues. Boy, I tell you, if you have an off-season basketball team, you're going to kill people in the paint because these guys are big. Jelani Woods is the one that everyone internally wants to see. There was big hopes last year. He had a decent rookie year, and then had those hamstring issues last year where he had the one and he's just about back from it, and then he injured the other one. He misses the whole year. So it's an interesting group, but when you've got like 5 or 6 that you kind of like, don't you want one guy that you really like? That's
yeah. And I want to see it in the Steichen offense. I think an all-around tight end would be spectacular for what he wants to do.
And then, again, when you've got Taylor in the backfield and you've got people outside or Josh Downs over the middle, and you got Pitt and either Pierce or Mitchell outside. There's you can't cover everybody, and that's where that tight end can leak out and get something down the field, no question. It's similar to what Dallas Clark. He was the perfect piece because they had so much else you had to worry about, and you can't, and he's just too much for a linebacker to cover. So yeah, if I had to say barring injury, who would it be? It'll be Jelani Woods. But as much as they talk about how we like the group and all that, you'd like to have the guy. Everybody wants the guy at the position to where you're not, the rotation, and we'll get everybody snaps. I want like 2 guys, 3 guys to get snaps.
I don't need the elite guy, right, Chapp? Yeah. I would settle for just an every down guy to all the points you just laid out. I don't need elite right now. I just want consistency instead of jack of all trades.
Right, and again, the injuries and the suspension by Ogletree last year. Again, I saw some really good things from Mallory. So that position, as much as I said, safety needs help, and it does. They just need to have in the tight end room somebody, two guys to really separate themselves. If I had to guess, it's Jelani Woods and Will Mallory, and then how does Mo, Ali Cox fit in, and can you carry a guy that's is without question the best blocker of the group, and he gives you a little bit in less and less in a passing game for whatever reason. I think we've seen the ceiling of Mo Ali Cox. He's played really well. He really has. But you want better, you want more complete, and they've got to figure that out over the next couple of months.
I found Will Mallory very intriguing last year. There were just a couple of times where you thought, there might be something here, right?
Yeah, but that's what you see with all these guys. Jelani would just say, yeah, really, maybe something. Again, Colin Granson's kind of who he is. That's what you're going to get. So that's you got intrigue at all those spots. You just I want something established as opposed to this guy might be this. When you get past OTAs and all that and getting into training camp, you want that to be ironed out, and you want him to be okay. We can trust this guy to do this, and that's where they have to get, particularly in the tight end room.
Now, Chapp, I'll leave you with this. And this absolutely falls under the category of like, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
I believe this gentleman is still with us. But if we're going into Ring of Honor, if we were going to give a Ring of Honor nominee for somebody just based on what their career could have been, then I say we put up O'Brien Alston and we have Freeman McNeil come for the honoring. And you and I are the only two people that probably even know what I'm talking about there.
I don't remember the connection. I do remember that O'Brien Alston had flashes. No. This is one where you know, and I don't know completely. So go ahead and.
And part of this, Chapp, is revisionist history because I was of the age of like peak sports fandom, idolizing players, that kind of thing when Alston played. But and I want to say he was there like 88, maybe 89. He had a really good start. He was a really good player. And then Freeman McNeil rolled into his knee and dislocated his knee, ending Alston's career. And Freeman McNeil was so shook up over it, he skipped the Jets' return flight out of Indianapolis after the game and went to the hospital to see O'Brien Alston.
Well, then you know that I don't. That's a great story.
Yeah.
And that's how fleeting these careers can be.
Totally. And yet it's also an example, because I don't know if he had like PC, how severe, but there are some injuries, Chapp. Gale Sayers is the first that comes to mind of guys that careers ended. Lars Tate from North Central High School, his career ended because of a knee injury that now would have him out 6 to 8 weeks,
Right. Yep.
It's the way it goes.
Timing in life is everything. When did it happen? When were you? Where were you? No question.
Chapp,
Nice
we
trivia.
appreciate it.
I like that.
Did you watch any On Patrol Live over the weekend? Because I got to get caught up.
We got caught up on Saturday, or Friday. Haven't done Sunday yet.
The man that
watches. They keep adding new cities. Well,
for Chapp, it's called On Patrol Rewind.
I know, and the best thing are the triple plays. Those are just that takes idiot people on steroids, but that's fun. It really is
the best. All right, Chapp, appreciate it. Have a good week.
I'm still waiting for you to send me my On Patrol Live mug. I thought you were going to send me one.
It's a mug shot, right? That's what we got to get.
Yeah. Oh God, that's terrible. Yep.
We'll get you one.
All right.
We'll talk to you. Mike Chappell from CBS 4 and Fox 59. Absolutely love it. O'Brien Alston, man, I loved him. That was my favorite player. He was like he's 6'6", 245. The dude looked like Adewale Ngoulie, who was the greatest IU football name for Don Fisher ever. Oh, what a lick from Adewale Ngoulie, the senior out of Staten Island, New York. It just rolled off of Don Fisher's tongue. Anyway, we'll come back. We'll get back into the conversation that we began the show with about a growing topic nationally that's epicentered in Indiana. We'll explain.
The laundry room. For as long as I can remember.
You want to know why the Olympics do massive television numbers?
Every 4 years?
That's a big part of it, for certain.
Civic pride?
Well, it'd be national pride, right?
Yeah.
That's a big part of it, for sure. But there's a reason, and it's masterful the way that they portray it. The Olympics does a massive number because it draws in the transcendent audience that is not typically a sports fan. And the way they do it, and you see it when you watch it. There are always one of the great games to play is, and I don't even have a list in front of me. I mean, like if I wrote them down, there'd be some, but there are athletes that become literally overnight sensation household names for like 2 weeks. And they're everywhere. And everybody, and America falls in love with them. And then because it's 4 years, like Michael Phelps should be the most beloved Taylor Swift level fame athlete in the history of this country. But he, like if I asked you right now, Jimmy, is Michael Phelps still active or is he retired?
He's retired.
When did he retire?
I think like 5 or 6 years ago.
That'd be my guess. Carl Lewis is a great example. Carl Lewis had a gold medal in the 84, 88, 92, and 96 Olympics and was a phenomenal athlete. And the only thing he's really known for outside of that is that national anthem thing. You never saw him in commercials. How did Carl Lewis not have like a million Nike commercials and everything else? The Olympics fascinate me in that regard because it's every 4 years, to your point. But the reason why they do such a huge television number is because sports fans will watch it because they watch the stick and ball sports that they're used to, or, obviously swimming is a massive one during the Olympics. But people also get intrigued by two things. Number one, sports that you don't normally see. Handball is like super fun to watch in the Summer Olympics. The ski jump in the Winter Olympics is, but
for me, curling
is cool. Curling is definitely cool.
Gotta wait 2 more years.
The really popular thing about the Olympics, though, that puts it over the top from a rating standpoint is predominantly female or older audiences that fall in love with and are fascinated by the backstories. The story of the runner from Trinidad that overcame poverty and they show you the home village and the town, or the story of the wrestler from Wyoming that went to a high school with 8 people and had to wrestle, had to drive,
train with a grizzly bear.
Correct. That kind of thing. Honestly, that's what the female viewing audience is a huge portion of the Olympic viewership, and that's why when you watch the Olympics, you see so much of the. It's just like when you watch American Idol or any of those. I mean, why the gentleman from Terre Haute that went out on America's Got Talent? Oh, Jimmy was in jury duty for that.
I did see the clip, but yes.
But the reason that story is so big is not just because he was a really good singer that sounded like he was Steve Perry, but because it's a janitor from Terre Haute, Indiana, and you hear his backstory, and that's what people connect to. And the Olympics.
Yeah, my mom was always a big fan of the Olympics for that exact reason. My
Correct.
wife is a casual sports fan, but she loves everything about the Olympics, especially the Summer Olympics, because they do such a great job of the storytelling.
Totally.
That often gets lost in the grind of a 162-game season or 18 weeks of NFL football or whatever, whereas all this action jammed into 2 weeks and extended, in fact, when you look at the Olympic trials and the swimming trials and everything, in that regard, you get a little extended taste, but really just 2 weeks of 2-3 weeks of just jam-packed action.
Now, Eddie, we have tickets to give away. Speaking of the Olympics and speaking of swimming, we have tickets to give away now for the finals of the Olympic swim trials, right? This
Correct.
is the evening sessions where you are going to get a chance. This is at Lucas Oil Stadium, which in itself is unique, and you get a chance to see those swimmers that are going to make their way and punch their ticket, pardon the pun, or pardon the phrase, I should say, into Paris to go and represent the United States in the Olympics, correct?
That is correct. You'll have your chance to see Lily King. She'll be competing there, downtown Indy. That starts the 15th of this month and ends the 23rd. That family 4-pack of tickets will be good for the 15th or the 16th for the finals that evening of either night. So you're getting 4 tickets to either night of those. On the 15th or the 16th, we will have another 2 to give away tomorrow and Wednesday, and then we'll have another 4-pack the rest of this week on Thursday and Friday, and 4 packs to give away next week as well.
Okay, so how are we giving these away?
Caller 4 again.
We're just doing caller 4. We're not doing trivia this time?
Not today.
Eddie's not in a fun mood.
I think Eddie doesn't trust us.
By the way, we did talk earlier about Caitlin Clark, and it is fascinating to me, Jimmy. Caller 4, by the way, 239-1070. You are on your way to the USA Swimming Olympic Trials. This is, again, evening sessions, the finals to determine who will be representing the Stars and Stripes in Paris. Jimmy, when we talked about Caitlin Clark, I'm going to go back simply to what I said earlier, and that is it's a huge national story. There were those, Diana Taurasi comes to mind, that said, like, look, this is going to be physical for her, and she is going to take a lot of physical punishment. We went over this a lot earlier in the program, but I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier. She's an unbelievable talent. She's a great player. There are a lot of things about her, but I think part of where she's falling victim here, there are a lot of things about her to love. But I think one of the things where she falls victim, and this is just simply being a young player, but I noticed this when she was at Iowa. I think Caitlin Clark's determination and her competitiveness, combined with her basketball acumen for just anticipating what's going to happen, oftentimes put her in position like we see with great players that try to go into coaching and aren't great coaches, because they assume that everyone else on the floor sees and anticipates things the same way that they do. And when that doesn't follow through and they make a pass that somebody's not anticipating, or they zip a ball in and the quick timing, the teammate then fumbles it or doesn't get set for the right shot, I think that irritates her. No, irritates is the wrong word. That frustrates her. Her body language is not good. I didn't think it was good at Iowa. And I think other players have seen that. And while I don't think that it is because of a dislike for her teammates, I think it has created that in addition to the incredible amount of attention and money publicly that we know that she has gotten. I have no idea what Diana Taurasi or Sue Bird or Cheryl Swoops or Skylar Diggins. I have no idea what they made in the WNBA, but I know that Caitlin Clark got 7-figure contracts and endorsement deals and shoe deals and is in Gatorade commercials and everything before she even played a game. And I think there is a resentment by the other players in the WNBA about the pedestal she's been placed upon. And I think the body language that she sometimes has, even more so at Iowa than within the WNBA, but that perception about her to, at times, her teammates has become reality, where they may see her as the young kid that, in fact, does need to be toughened up a little bit. And the fact that the players, her teammates, have not been getting and standing in the way of those players that are being physical with her and seemingly having at least the perception that they more have her back, is becoming the reality that there is a divide there.
And whether it's her teammates, which, again, it's a gray area. We talked about it earlier in the show. We're not there. I don't know how deep that actually is, whether it is opponents, whether it's the WNBA as a whole. Caitlin Clark, whether there's envy or not, which there clearly is, of everything that she has received, the praise, her dominance of the college game, the Nike deal, the State Farm commercials, I get it. There's envy there, but to this level, to the level of eyeball she has on her, to the level of coverage she gets nationally, leading conversations, be it on national platforms or be it here on Query & Company. We haven't seen anything like this before. I'm not even talking about the charter flights. I'm talking about the viewership, and I'm talking about the amount of money that she got before playing a game in the W is insane. Unheard of. There is nothing wrong with healthy competition and healthy enviness there. But this next step in the long legacy of women's sports and its continued growth in this country, I don't want us to look back on it and think that there was misrepresentation of the sport itself by a couple of jealous players when she is, to an extent, the golden goose of your sport.
She is.
And should be, you would hope, her trials and tribulations through this is the first of many big paydays for players currently in the WNBA and those that are going to come after her in that regard of getting unheard of amounts of popularity and money.
I think they'll learn
at that rate.
I think they'll learn to appreciate that, but the first thought is, but you got to earn it, kid. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I'm not saying
And she
I agree with that.
definitively did collegiately, but professionally they're not used to it.
Correct.
And I get the envy, but at some point all of it needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah, I mean, yes, when a player is physical on her and then gets on their chartered flight to fly to the next city, they probably should stop and think about it, right? Jimmy's plays next.
I'm John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan. Last year, more clients.
Plays of the day, all featuring baseball bets. We'll start first with Jake's favorite. We'll take cute fella, the Baltimore Orioles, to win the money line in an AL East showdown in Toronto against the Blue Jays. A little bit later this evening, we'll take the Texas Rangers to win the money line over the Detroit Tigers. Last one for you. Give me over. This at plus 130 juice. Over half a stolen base for Ellie De La Cruz of the Cincinnati
Can you
Reds.
imagine if he got just a half a stolen
They are
base?
against the Colorado Rockies.
I feel bad for you, Jimmy, because he's probably going to get benched tonight. He's going to get rested, and he'll probably have a pinch hit appearance, and your bet's going to lose.
You know what that is, though? If he doesn't get a pinch hit appearance, it's a void. That's what that is. Those are your plays of the day. Eddie, got anything for you?
In the Reds game, actually, they're in Colorado, so I'll take the under on Andrew Abbott strikeouts, under 4.5. As you know, in that air quality in Colorado, the ball doesn't spin as much. There's not as much rotation, not as much.
Do you
break.
know
He's
something
not
about
big...
the air quality out there in Colorado?
Yep,
Okay,
I did.
all right.
Did indeed.
Okay.
So yeah, he hasn't cleared 4.5, by the way, in each of his last 3 starts. So, and Colorado very good against left-handed pitchers. So under 4.5 Ks today for Andrew Abbott, pitcher for the Reds.
There you go. Under 4.5 K is Andrew Abbott. Baltimore Orioles on the money line. Ellie De La Cruz over half a stolen base, and the Rangers over the Tigers. Those are your plays of the day.
By the way, is JMV here today, or is he on location?
I saw him, so I'm going to say he's here.
What were you just saying about Ellie De La Cruz? You remember like what a brush fire it was when he first entered into the league, right?
Yes.
He had the cycle in like the first month of his career. Yeah.
Water finding that's level a little bit there, or what's going on with that?
Well,
Reds being the Reds.
That too.
He was hitting like 280, nearly 300 when they had him 6th in the lineup. Then they're like, you know what? Let's move this guy up to try to help the offense a little bit in the top half of the order. And then now he's struggling. His average has dipped down to like 245. So
most stolen bases in the MLB right now at 32.
Yep.
12 above second place.
He's only had 2 stolen bases in the last 20 days because he had 4 against the Dodgers in a 4-for-4 game, and then it's just been all downhill from there.
Now
It's the cycle of Reds fandom.
Here's a question for you this coming weekend. Speaking of baseball, Brewers are out of town. We're going to be at Road America. That's in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin.
Went to that park 2 years ago. Nice park.
Brewers Park?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. But they're out of town, unfortunately. They're in, actually, I think Detroit.
They got the slide. The mascot goes down a slide.
Bernie
Okay.
Brewer, yep.
My bad.
Now, the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers, I think AA team in Appleton, 40 minutes away.
Nice. I stayed in Appleton when we went to Chiefs Packers back in December.
Do I go to the Timber Rattlers game, or do I just hang around where we are?
Do you have a weird collection of minor league hats or something that you would get a token of the trip? Would that be cool for you?
I went to a Chattanooga Lookouts game once and got a hat there, but
did you always have your head on a swivel during that game?
What's that?
Did you always have your head on a swivel during that game?
Well played.
Thank you.
They were playing the Huntsville Trash Pandas.
Oh, I love Trash Pandas.
Yeah,
that's a Reds affiliate, I believe now. By the way,
the Lookouts of the Trash Pandas.
Trash Pandas.
They're my favorite. They're my favorite team name, I think, in all of professional sports. I love the Trash Pandas.
I went to a Timber Rattlers game 20 years ago, and the manager was Gary Thurman, North Central class of '83. I'm like, hey, hail our Panthers.
Went up against somebody, a part of his family, Roy Thurman. Absolute nukes all the time.
Yeah, Roy Thurman's his cousin. Actually, you're probably talking about Roy Thurman. I'm sorry. Roy Thurman was a year older than I, and you're talking about Roy's kid.
That would that'd be correct then, yeah.
Roy Thurman, who was a year older than I, is the cousin of Gary Thurman, and Roy Thurman was a bigger dude but had wheels. And you said that the one you played against was good?
Oh, yeah, the dude just hit bombs all the time. I'm pretty sure he's one of the only batters I've ever seen hit a ball over dead center field at Decatur Central because it's 400 feet.
If I go to a Timber Rattlers game, I will bring you back a hat, Eddie. Good news is they make them big enough for timber, so it might actually fit. J&B's up next. Thanks to Mike Chapp. Thanks to Scott Agness. We will join you again tomorrow. You've been listening to Query & Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Wake Up Call